When Adira reached the slave market, she decisively headed to her personal quarters with 13 in tow. She made sure to lock the door so that no one would disturb them. The 7-year-old made himself feel at home and even laid down on the couch, making himself very comfortable. "You sure know how to enjoy life, Zion." Adira giggled after seeing that the boy didn't seem to be feeling anxious about being alone with her inside her room. "Life is meant to be enjoyed," 13 replied. "You know what they say, happiness is eating, sleeping, and repeating." "Are you a pig?" "Do I look like a pig?" Adira could only shake her head helplessly before sitting down on the couch where the boy was lying down. She even raised the boy's head and placed it on her lap, making the boy frown. "Your legs are hard," 13 commented. "What are you eating? Steel?" "Only on the weekends," Adira replied casually. "Are you feeling scared now?" "Not really." "Oh, Zion. I am very tempted to make you feel all sorts of pain right now." For many, being alone with a drow was a horrifying experience because they were a very vicious race. They liked to inflict pain on others as a means of showing their superiority, for this was the belief that had been instilled in them since birth. For them, seeing the fear in the eyes of those who looked at them was the greatest form of recognition. But the only gaze that 13 gave her was that of boredom, which made the smile on her face widen even more. "Tell me, Zion, what are you doing here in the Valbera archipelago?" Adira asked. "I asked that boy, Colbert, about you, and the only thing he said was that you are a monster." "Monster?" Zion snorted. "How rude. Do I look like a monster?" "Yes," Adira replied. "You are a monster in my eyes." "Then there's something wrong with your eyes, Adira." "My master says the same thing, but I always prove her wrong." "So enough nonsense. Tell me your goal here in Groner City." 13 kept his eyes closed and remained perfectly still. Tiona was curled up on his chest and eyeing Adira as if she were a thieving cat that was trying to steal her pillow. "My goal?" 13 smiled with his eyes still closed. "Survival, of course. Isn't that the same for everyone?" "Aside from survival, what are your short-term plans?" Adira inquired. "Let's see. I want to hunt a Warzer black hound because I will need its hair to use as the bowstring for the bow that I made earlier," 13 answered. "Since the dark wing bow was taken from me, I had no choice but to make my own bow from scratch." "Ah, Warzer black hound?" Adira arched an eyebrow. "Can you even catch that at your level? That thing moves pretty fast." "Well, I won't know until I try." 13 shrugged. Adira wanted to pat Zion's hair, but Tiona suddenly hissed as if telling the drow, who was many times stronger than her, to not touch her master. "Your pet is very cute," Adira commented. "I know, right?" 13 smiled faintly as he reached out to pat the black snake's head with his finger, making Tiona calm down. "Do you know that I was the one who gave this snake to Norris to be sold at the auction?" Adira stated. "It seems that she has forgotten who had taken good care of her before she arrived here in the Valbera archipelago." "Oh, so you came from the main continent?" 13's interest was finally piqued. "I do," Adira replied. "Can I join you on your return trip back to the main continent, Lady Adira?" "Lady Adira? It seems that you are capable of being polite to people when you need something from them, huh?" "Of course not. You're overthinking things, Lady Adira." "Cut it out, Zion. You're giving me goosebumps." In order to reach the main continent, 13 would need to travel by boat. The only way to do that was to either build a boat of his own, which he had no intention of doing, or to simply pay a merchant to take him to the continent. He had planned to leave the Valbera archipelago as soon as Christopher had finished his mission, which was lighting the beacon of hope. Since the chubby boy would return to Pangea after completing his mission, 13 would be left on his own. This was why he needed a way to return to the main continent. If he could head to one of the cities that had a teleportation gateway, then he could go through one that would lead him back to Pangea. "Be honest with me, Zion," Adira lightly patted the boy's head. "You plan to steal something from the city lord, right? If it was not the bow, you're probably aiming for the 5-leaf clover." This action of hers almost made Tiona lunge at her. If not for the fact that 13 had ordered her telepathically to not bite Adira, The black snake would have already sunk her teeth into the drow's hand by now. I don't know what you're talking about, Lady Adira, 13 replied in a casual tone. I'm just a weak 7-year-old boy who will die if the city lord pinches me. Why would I even think of stealing something from him? You almost convinced me, but I know that you went there to steal something. Adira playfully tugged on a few strands of Zion's hair, making Tiona hiss at her fiercely. It takes a thief to know a fellow thief, you know? Lady Adira, in this lifetime, I haven't stolen anything from anyone, 13 stated. At least, not yet. In this lifetime? Adira smirked. You say some very interesting words, Zion. Does that mean that you've stolen many things in your previous lifetimes? Well, I don't really believe in life after death because when our race dies, we return to the Duma's embrace. 13 didn't make any comment because it was not his place to tell Adira about what really happened after death. Also, there were different laws for different worlds, and the world of Solterra had its own set of laws that managed the circle of life and death. Duma is the celestial of silence, right? 13 inquired. As for the drows who like conquest and war, they worship the fiend, Belial, who represents lawlessness. You sure know a lot of things, Zion, Adira commented as she continued to pat the boy's hair. Indeed. My sisters and brothers, who still continue their lifestyle, worship Belial. Well, to each their own. My eyes were opened early. That is when I discovered that empathy and compassion still exist even in my dark heart. Even so, I choose who to be compassionate to, for example, you, Zion. I am honored, Lady Adira, 13 said. Now, about your return trip to the main continent. Just as Adira was about to answer the boy's question, a loud explosion spread within the quiet night. 13 and Adira, who had an idea of what was happening, remained calm and didn't even bother to leave the couch where they were talking. It has begun, 13 said softly. Indeed, Adira nodded as she continued to pat 13's head. Let's just wait until the morning. Perhaps, after this incident, that arrogant man will learn what humility is. 13 smiled faintly after hearing the drow's words. He didn't know if the city lord would learn anything about humility after this incident. But there was one thing he did know. Once morning came, the city would be under martial law as Arthas and his officials looked for the thieves who dared to steal several items from within the city lord's treasury. While the guards of the city were scouring the streets to look for the thieves that had stolen a few things from the city lord's residence, 13 was sleeping soundly on the couch inside Adira's living quarters. The drow had left to inform Norris about what had happened earlier, so the slave master wouldn't be left in the dark. Adira had sensed the presence of these powerful individuals a few hours ago, so she didn't hesitate to grab Zion and escape while they still could. The last thing she wanted was to get involved in whatever scheme the people targeting the city lord were doing. It might be a power struggle, Norris commented after hearing Adira's report. But what I don't understand is why they are doing it right before a war between the barbarians and the Tigerkins is about to take place. Weakening one of their champions before the war starts is a very stupid thing to do in my book. Perhaps they just want to kick the city lord from his position, Adira shrugged. Commanding an entire city filled with warriors during a war and gaining military merit will allow them to reap bigger benefits. Norris pondered a bit before nodding his head. Or they could just be after something else entirely, like a unique and powerful artifact that the city lord keeps inside his treasury. It's all just speculation at this point. Also, this is none of our business. Well, you're not wrong. Norris and Adira had come to the Valbera archipelago in order to create a branch of their organization and use the Sumatran kingdom as one of their bases of operation. They were extending outward, sending people to different kingdoms and empires, digging their roots deep into their land. Once they had secured their foundations, it would be easier to send their agents to build connections with the local people, increasing the size of their web, allowing faster transfer of information. Norris had already made a reputation of being a slave master who brought in monsters from the main continent that weren't seen or heard of within the Valbera archipelago. Because of his unique merchandise, he managed to worm his way into Groner City and become one of the top merchants when it came to slave trading. Now that he had planted his roots, The second phase of their project was underway, which was why Adira was sent by their organization to aid him in the Valbera continent. However, before the drow left their headquarters, her master, a shaman, had given her the black snake, who was now named Tiona, because of a vision that she saw. She stated that whoever became the owner of the Domini Mortis was someone whom their organization must befriend no matter what, because there would come a time when they would need that person's help. So, when 13 managed to acquire the black snake, Adira paid more attention to him because it was what their master had asked of her. For now, you and your men should stay here in the slave market and don't wander off anywhere, Adira said. Also, there is a high chance that the city guards will come here to search for those thieves. If you have any valuables lying around, it will be best if you keep them on your person or hide them somewhere safe. Arthas might use this opportunity to regain his losses by planting false charges of theft upon people who have valuables treasures on them. Norris nodded his head in understanding. Understood. Don't let Zion leave until sunrise tomorrow. We don't want him being wrongfully accused now, do we? A sneer appeared on Adira's face. I'm sure that the city lord doesn't want to make more enemies than he currently has. He saw me take Zion away last night, so although he will suspect him, he will not actively target him. I hope you're right, Adira. Norris sighed. I hope you're right. When Zion opened his eyes, it was already morning. He had a good night's rest despite the commotion that was happening in the city. Although he was unable to procure the 5-leaf clover, he didn't regret being taken away by Adira to safety. After all, his life was more important than the clover. At that moment, the door inside the room opened and Adira came in with a smile on her face. Good morning, Zion, Adira greeted. Are you hungry? Good morning, Lady Adira, 13 replied. And yes, I am hungry. Great. I was just about to have breakfast. Adira made a gesture for the boy to come to her. Let's have breakfast together. 13 nodded because he had no reason to reject her offer. When they arrived at the dining area, Norris was already there and drinking a cup of hot cocoa. In Solterra, there were many cacao trees, and the locals had learned to grind them to powder, making it a staple drink, similar to coffee in Pangea. Good morning, Zion, Norris said with a smile. You might be the only one who is able to have the luxury of sleeping in Adira's personal quarters without having their limbs broken. I am very impressed by your achievement. Good morning, Sir Norris, 13 replied. Lady Adira was kind enough to let me stay for the night. She is a very wonderful person. The corner of Norris' lips twitched after hearing the younger boy's reply. The wonderful person he was referring to was actually one of the agents of their organization, who specialized in killing and torture. If blood, gore, and brutality was the boy's definition of a wonderful person, then Norris didn't know what a good person was in Zion's book. Come and eat while the food is still warm, Norris said after he regained his composure. After that, you should return to your warehouse and tell your friends to behave and not leave the city for now. 13 nodded in understanding because he agreed with Norris' advice. Thank you, Sir Norris, 13 replied. But before I return to the warehouse, do you still have tigerkin slaves for sale? Of course I do, Norris smiled like the businessman that he was. In fact, there were 4 barbarians who sold me the tigerkins they captured 2 days ago. Unfortunately, due to certain circumstances, they are more expensive as well. How much? 13 inquired. 8,000 silver for each slave, Norris answered. 13 frowned. That's quite a price hike. What happened? 13 had brought Percival for 200 silver coins, while Christopher bought Jasmine and Ariel for less. But now all tigerkin slaves, regardless of their gender and age, cost 1,000 silver each. Zion, I don't know if you are aware of this, but there is a high possibility of a war breaking out between the tigerkins and the barbarians very soon. Because of this, the raids that the two sides were making against each other lessened due to the settlements having more defenders than usual. Several of the barbarian raiding parties raiding the tigerkin villages have been killed in action, making tigerkin slaves more expensive than their original price. I'll tell you now, they will probably get more expensive in the next few days, so if you plan to buy tigerkin slaves, buy them now before their prices further increase. 13 pondered for a bit before asking Norris how many tigerkin slaves he currently had. I have 5 of them, Norris answered. 3 young men and 2 young ladies. They're a few years older than the slave that you bought from me. You're in luck because they only received minor injuries when they were captured, and all of their wounds should be healed by now. Since I don't think I'll be getting more tigerkin slaves soon, I won't be giving you any friend discounts this time. Very well, 13 nodded. I'll buy all of them, Sir Norris. 13 was planning to speed up Percival's hero training and allow his character progression to take place. However, heroes tended to become more powerful when they had people they needed to protect. Since the 7-year-old was certain that Percival had no plans of protecting him unless he explicitly ordered him to do so, he decided to find people that the tigerkin would protect without a second thought. This was where the other tigerkin slaves came in. Since 13 planned to become a villain in order to speed up Percival's growth, he would use the most optimum method in his arsenal. And that method was to create a hero party consisting of tigerkins for his little slave. Heroes are born for a reason, 13 thought. Since Taiga is here, this means that he will play a major role in the upcoming crisis that will befall the Sumatran kingdom. As to what crisis it will be, I hope that it isn't a big one. During the growth of a hero, they would often face both minor and major crises to develop their heart, body, and mind. Even a minor crisis could be very troublesome, so 13 hoped that whatever was coming their way wasn't something too dangerous. Okay, let me introduce all of you to everyone, 13 said as he pointed at the chubby teenager on his right side. This is Christopher. You can think of him as my right-hand man. Christopher, who had been called as the younger boy's right-hand man, was surprised because he didn't expect that 13 thought highly of him. This lady over here is Rihanna, 13 stated as he pointed at the young lady on his left side. She is the leader of her own hunting party and currently helping me manage this warehouse. The human slaves that you see working here in the warehouse are all under her command. But make no mistake, we operate differently. I don't command her slaves because they are her responsibility. Likewise, she cannot command any of you because you are my responsibility. The 7-year-old wanted to make everything clear that there were 2 divisions of manpower that were staying inside the warehouse. The 5 of you will be put on the same team as this boy, Taiga, 13 stated. He is not going to be your leader. All of you are my slaves, so you will only take orders from me. Do all of you understand? The tigerkins, whose ages ranged from 16 to 19 years old, glared at the human boy who had bought them from the slave market. If not for the boy's command of absolute loyalty and servitude, all the tigerkins would have already ganged up to tear him apart. I asked all of you a question, 13 said calmly. Your answers. Even after being asked for the second time, none of the tigerkins gave him any reply and only glared in his direction. Aside from their loyalty, 13 had ordered them to openly show their dislike for him, and even gave them the freedom to choose to reply or not. Of course, he did this so that the tigerkins could silently defy him and make their hatred known. However, if 13 ordered them to answer, they would answer without a doubt. But, since he didn't give such orders, they chose to remain silent and show their hostility towards their new master. Percival clenched his fists because he, too, felt the same way as his brethren. If possible, he didn't want to obey the boy's orders, but his instincts were telling him that defying him openly would only make him suffer. As if to prove this thought to be correct, 13 raised his hand. Immediately, T1, who was the leader of the trolls, punched one of the older tigerkins in the chest, sending the latter flying. I asked all of you a question, 13 said coldly. Do all of you understand what I just said? Even if you hurt us, you will not break our spirit, one of the tigerkin boys shouted. I am from the Maddox clan. I will not yield even if I die. Well said. 13 smirked. Lady Adira, can you please make him more obedient for me? Oh my, you're already treating me as one of your thugs. Adira arched an eyebrow. You really have nerves of steel, Zion. I know for a fact that when it comes to torture, nothing can beat Drows in this regard. I am simply asking the help of a professional in order to discipline my slave. It will cost you. How much? 8,000 silver per hour, Adira replied. I already gave you a friend discount. Deal. 13 nodded. The Tigerkin, who came from the Maddox clan, didn't plan on going down without a fight. Since Adira wasn't one of the younger boy's subordinates, this meant that it was fine to attack her. Moving at a speed that was faster than a human, the Tigerkin closed in the distance with his claws fully extended to tear his target apart. However, he made one mistake. Adira was no ordinary drow. She was a champion, whose rank far surpassed the Tigerkin who dared to lunge at her by leaps and bounds. A moment later, the sound of something cracking reverberated in the surroundings, followed by a blood-curdling scream. Adira had casually flicked her finger, hitting the claws of the Tigerkin who had tried to attack her. A second after that, the hand of the Tigerkin was bent into an unnatural angle, making the latter scream in pain. Adira smiled sweetly because it had been a while since she heard someone scream in pain. Even though she had broken free from the savage behavior of her race, she was still a drow, and found the sound of people's scream music to her ears. With one fluid motion, Adira closed the gap and once again flicked his fingers, hitting the Tigerkin's arms. Just like what happened earlier, the arm was once again bent into an unnatural angle, making the pain that the Tigerkin was feeling intensify. Tears, snot, and drool leaked out from the orifices on his face, but this didn't stop the drow from making him feel an even greater amount of pain than he was already feeling at the moment. Adira grabbed the Tigerkin's dislocated arm and fixed it back in place. However, a second later, she dislocated it once more, to the horror of those watching the spectacle. "Stop it," Percival said as he blocked 13's view, staring down at him. "I said stop it." "Stand aside, Tyga," 13 ordered, making Percival's body stiffen. Percival gritted his teeth as he fought hard against the order that was given to him. The pain that was assaulting his head was getting stronger with each passing second, and he knew that if it reached a certain threshold, he would probably lose consciousness from it. In the end, Tyga stepped aside, allowing 13 to watch the torturous show in front of him. Percival, on the other hand, gritted his teeth and clenched his fists tightly. Maddox, who was currently being tortured by Adira in front of the other Tigerkins, couldn't do anything except shout in pain. Half an hour later, he collapsed on the ground, unconscious, with both of his arms still dislocated. "Well then, where was I?" 13 said as he stared at one of the two Tigerkin ladies, whose faces had become pale after witnessing the suffering that their brethren had experienced. "I asked you a question earlier," 13 said in a teasing tone. "Are you going to answer me, or do you want to have some fun with Lady Adira over there?" "Eek." The Tigerkin lady, who seemed to be around 16 to 17 years old, took a step back. However, her legs didn't have enough strength to support her body, making her fall on the ground. 13 ignored her sorry state as he crouched down to look her in the eye. "It seems that you Tigerkins and I don't speak the same language," 13 smirked. "But that's fine. You're lucky, we have a good teacher here, who will teach you all the things you need to know about how to become obedient. Lady Adira, if you please." "And no," the Tigerkin girl almost shouted the moment the drow walked towards her direction. Adira chuckled because she didn't mind playing the bad guy, which was second nature to her. But before she could approach the Tigerkin girl on the ground, something appeared at the corner of her vision. The drow instinctively stepped aside, allowing Percival, who had lunged at her from the side, to pass harmlessly. Since his sneak attack had missed, Percival decided to go all out against the drow, who was harming his people. Suddenly, his hands and feet were covered with golden flames, making Adira arch an eyebrow. Tigerkins specialized in combat, and very few of them were capable of using magic. The golden flames that appeared on Percival's hands and feet were not exactly magical flames. No, this was the manifestation of an ancient technique that had been passed down from generation to generation of Tigerkins. It was called King's Might, and only the members of the royal family had been taught this technique since ancient times. However, Percival wasn't a member of the royal family. He was able to use this ability because all Tigerkins were capable of using it if their resolve reached a certain threshold. This hidden power also activated if they were fighting opponents who were stronger than them. "I won't let you touch her," Percival growled as he prepared to fight the drow, who was several times stronger than him. The smile on Adira's face widened when she saw Percival's eyes, which were filled with determination. What she liked the most was breaking people with those eyes, so she decided to play with the boy a bit and make him understand that in the face of absolute strength, his resistance was useless. 13, who was watching this from the side, smiled faintly. It seems that bringing Adira here was the right choice. 13 mused as he looked at his heroic slave, who was starting to awaken his powers at a pace that was much faster than that of his peers. Percival moved twice as fast as he normally could, unleashing a barrage of punches in Adira's direction. His face was full of anger and determination, but no matter how much effort he put into his attacks, he still failed to land any of them on the drow's body. Adira had a faint smile on her face as she dodged the tigerkin's attacks with ease. "Is that your best, boy?" Adira taunted. "I'll fall asleep at this rate." Percival didn't reply, as he continued to increase the frequency of his attacks, making the other tigerkins cheer for him. The drow found all of this amusing, so she decided to play with her prey a bit. With a simple movement of her leg, she easily tripped Pervical, causing the latter's body to lose balance and fall down. However, instead of meeting the ground, what the tigerkin met was the drow's foot, and it sent him flying toward the wall of the warehouse. A pained groan escaped Percival's lips, but he quickly propped himself up from the ground and took a fighting stance. 13, who was paying close attention to the battle, rubbed his chin. "King's might," 13 mused. This technique doubles the person's overall performance. Unlike a berserk skill, which squeezes every drop of a person's strength, multiplying it 3 to 4 times for a short period of time, King's might lasts longer. As expected of a mythical technique used by heroes. Abilities that boosted one's strength were something that all heroes possessed. They would often activate this during life and death battles, allowing them to get a boost of strength whenever they needed it the most. Percival was a rank 1 tigerkin, but thanks to the effects of King's might, he was able to jump to a rank 2 tigerkin instantly. Truth be told, it was still far too early for him to have learned this skill. In normal cases, he would only learn it after he reached the age of 16 years old. But due to 13's treatment of his slave, Percival's physical and mental state were developing at a rapid rate, allowing him to grow faster as a hero. The tigerkin was only 13 years old. By the time he reached 16, he would definitely be several times stronger than he was now. There might even come a time when he would be able to break free of 13's control, and once that happened, he would do everything in his power to pay his master back for everything that he had done to him. Unfortunately for Percival, he wouldn't get that chance. 13 fully intended to train him until he would no longer be able to lift a single finger to defy him. Even if he were to grow stronger, just the thought of antagonizing his master would fill him with so much dread that he wouldn't even consider opposing him. 20 minutes later, Percival lay on the ground, with Adira's feet stepping on his head. His entire body was covered in shallow cuts and bruises, making him look extremely pitiful. The golden flames on his hands and feet had already dispersed, showing that the ability, King's Might, had already reached its time limit. "Okay, that's enough," 13 clapped his hands. "The entertainment is over. Now, back to me asking you guys questions." When the boy's gaze landed on the tigerkins, all of them subconsciously shuddered. 13 had released a fraction of his killing intent, nearly paralyzing and suffocating them. Even Adira was surprised because she didn't expect to feel such strong killing intent coming from Zion, who mostly looked docile in her eyes. "If you obey me, all of you will be able to live decent lives," 13 stated. "If not, well, I will use all of you to relieve the stress of the trolls and ogres who serve under me." A devilish smile appeared on the boy's face as he glanced at the 2 tigerkin ladies, making their faces turn pale. "Ah, I forgot, you tigerkins have a very strong sense of smell, right?" The smile on 13's face widened before he clapped his hands. A moment later, Giga walked right behind the 7-year-old and eyed the tigerkins with amusement. "I'm sure you haven't seen this creature before, so you probably don't have any idea about what he is capable of doing," 13 explained. "But let me give you all an example of what my friend, Giga can do." The boy then pointed in the direction of Percival, making Adira immediately back away because she understood what 13 had planned to do. "Go, Giga Chad, 13 commanded. Give him the Giga Destroyer. The Chad skunk turned around and raised its tail. A moment later, a horrifying yellow spray erupted from its backside, covering Percival's entire body. Suddenly, a smell so foul that even the trolls and ogres, who were known for being smelly themselves, immediately backed away while covering their noses. The tigerkins, who had a very strong sense of smell, hearing, and eyesight, immediately held their stomachs before vomiting at the same time. Even though they were a distance away, wind still blowed in their direction, so the smell immediately reached their noses as soon as the Chad skunk unleashed its deadly spray that could make even stronger monsters flee due to how incredibly stinky it was. Percival, who had been hit by the stink spray, also vomited before his eyes rolled up in their sockets. The pitiful tigerkin fell unconscious on the ground, his body twitching from time to time. The only saving grace was that the stink spray of the Chad skunk wasn't lethal, so no one would die from it even if they were hit by it directly. Even so, the experience would be so traumatic that they would never want to face a Chad skunk ever again in their lifetime. Oh, I forgot that there is one more problem child here, 13 commented as he looked at the tigerkin, whom Adira had beaten up earlier. You said earlier that even if you are hurt, your spirit will not break, right? You are from the Maddox clan, so you will not yield, even if you die, right? Stop, the tigerkin shouted. I yield. I surrender. I beg you. 13 laughed like the second-rate villain that he was before commanding Giga Chad to once again use his Giga Destroyer. On that day, the 5 tigerkin slaves, the 10 trolls, and the 2 orcs that 13 had bought in the slave market vowed in their hearts to no longer defy the fiendish boy, whose laughter was enough to invoke the greatest fears that were hidden in the depths of their bestial hearts. After he was done educating the tigerkins that going against him was a very stupid thing to do, 13 went to the west side of the warehouse alongside Christopher and Rihanna to meet with Harry. The teenage boy had been waiting patiently for 13's arrival because he wanted to talk to him about something very important. We meet again, Harry, 13 said. What happened to you and your team? It's nice to meet you again, Zion, Harry replied. If I knew that things would end up the way they did, I would have left with you and Rihanna back then. That guy, Colbert, is more troublesome than he looked. Tell me everything that happened from start to finish, 13 stated before sitting beside Harry. If possible, don't leave any important information behind. Harry nodded and told Zion everything that had happened since they parted ways. According to the scion of the Remington clan, they were slowly but surely making progress in the Houdini Desert. However, their overconfidence got the better of them after winning several battles against the monsters that they faced. Because of this, they decided to aim for an even bigger game. Harry glanced in Christopher's direction before continuing his tale. Colbert suggested that we should hunt trolls in order to get avatars, just like Christopher, Harry explained. Everyone was confident since we had just finished a successful hunt, so they all agreed to his proposal. Since the majority had made their voices known, I decided to agree as well. But that was where things made an awful turn. A pained look appeared on Harry's face as he recalled the things that happened to his hunting party. We succeeded in hunting a few trolls who were hunting alone, Harry stated. But on our 4th attempt, something unexpected happened. The lone troll we were targeting was carrying some sort of horn. When it realized that it could not beat us, it blew its horn loudly. I knew then and there that we were in trouble, so I immediately ordered all of us to retreat. Unfortunately, we made a wrong turn when we were running away and got ambushed by a hunting party. There were simply too many of them, and fighting them off was impossible. The only thing we could do was run in different directions, hoping that, by doing so, it would allow others to escape. Those who survived headed back to the cave where we had left our food supplies. After resting for a day, I decided to head east because you said that the barbarian city was in that direction, and here I am. 13 nodded after Harry finished telling his story. So what do you plan to do now? 13 asked. If possible, I'd like to start over, Harry replied. Can I join your team instead? Instead of leading, I feel like following you is the most optimal choice I can make right now. 13 closed his eyes to ponder a bit about Harry's proposal. As one of the scions of the Remington clan, The teenage boy was properly trained in martial arts, which would be a great boost in manpower. If the teenage boy had asked him this a month ago, 13 would have readily accepted Harry's proposal. But things were different now. He no longer needed Harry. Harry needed him. But as a member of the Remington clan, he just couldn't abandon him because he still wanted to get an attack helicopter as a reward for saving his life. Because of this, he decided to push him towards Rihanna so that the latter would have to deal with him herself. Since you plan to become a teammate, instead of a team leader, I will assign you to join Rihanna's hunting party. Her goal is to strengthen all the Wanderers by moving as an elite unit. With you joining their ranks, they will be many times stronger. Harry glanced at Rihanna before shifting his attention back to 13. Can I join your team instead? Harry inquired. According to Rihanna, the two of you are working on different things. If possible, I'd like to be on your team instead of hers. Rihanna didn't say anything, but she felt a little annoyed because Harry chose Zion over her. However, she knew that if she were also given the same choice, she would choose Zion over Harry. This was why, when Zion decided to leave with Christopher, Rihanna didn't hesitate and joined their team instead of staying with Harry and the other Wanderers. Although Zion was younger, in her eyes, she had the highest chance of survival if she were to join him. You really want to join my team? 13 asked. Yes, Harry replied. Then how about this? 13 raised a finger as if telling Harry that he would allow him to join his team on one condition. Join Rihanna's hunting party for a week. If you still think that you can't work well with her hunting party, then I will consider letting you join my team. How does that sound? Harry thought for a bit before nodding his head. I accept this condition, Harry replied. Good. 13 then glanced at Rihanna. Don't give him any special treatment. He will be one of your hunting members for a week, so make sure that he earns his keep. Report his performance to me after a week. If I don't find it satisfactory, I will not accept him on my team. Okay, Rihanna replied. You heard him, Harry. I only expect the best from you. If you don't get my approval, forget about joining Zion. I will kick you out of my hunting party. Harry sighed in his heart, but he still nodded his head. Understood. I will not let you down. After that small talk was over, 13 returned to his side of the warehouse to talk to Visago for a bit. Just as he expected, the city lord had decreed that the entire city would be put on lockdown. As an expert tracker, Arthas had placed several tracking spells on the treasures in his possession, allowing him to sense their presence. Since he had detected that they were still in the city, he rallied his elite guards and officials and visited the locations where he believed the treasures were hidden. They were able to retrieve a few of the items that were stolen, but the most important treasure that the city lord kept in his treasury wasn't found. Although Arthas couldn't tell why the thieves didn't take the other items with them when they made their escape, it didn't change the fact that something very important was stolen from him. Whoever did this as planned for it for a very long time, Arthas thought as he returned to his residence with the treasures he had retrieved. Fortunately, they will not be able to use that artifact because I have the other half with me. Once they discover that they cannot use it, they will definitely confront me in the future. I better make sure to hide the other half in a place they will never find it. Arthas' gaze became cold as he looked in a certain direction in his city. A few minutes later, he returned to his room to rest. He hadn't gotten any sleep since the thieves had barged inside of his home. Once he was properly rested, he would handle the aftermath of this incident and wait for the return of those who were targeting the treasure that was left behind to him by his father. 3 days later, 13 and his hunting party left Groner City to travel to the Warzer Plains. Their lineup caught the attention of many people since the number of individuals in the party was equivalent to a mid-sized hunting party. All in all, 7 wagons departed the city. While this wasn't something that others had seen before, it was the composition of the parties that caught everyone's attention. 13, Christopher, Giga Chad, and the chubby boys' 2 Tigerkin slaves, Jasmine and Ariel, were riding in the first wagon. Percival and the 5 other Tigerkins, whom 13 had named P1 up to P5, rode the second wagon. T1, who was the leader of the trolls, was riding in the third wagon, alongside T2 and T3. As for T4, T5, T6, and T7, they were in the fourth wagon. T8, on the other hand, was driving the fifth wagon, accompanying the two ogres, O1 and O2. T9 and T10 were driving the 6th and 7th wagons, which would serve as the storage wagons for the things that they would manage to acquire on their hunt. However, a few minutes after they left the city, 13 saw a black wagon approaching their group from behind. Without wasting a second, he gave a special signal to his subordinates, telling them to get ready to attack if the approaching wagon had bad intentions. But when he saw the drow, Adira, waving at him from inside the wagon, a frown appeared on his face. "What's wrong, Lady Adira?" 13 asked when the black wagon had decreased its speed to move side by side with the wagon he was in. "Do you have business outside of the city?" "Yes," Adira replied. "It's a personal business, and I happen to be going in the same direction as you. Since that is the case, we might as well travel together. Don't worry. I don't intend to get in the way of your hunt in the Warzer Plains." "Understood, Lady Adira," 13 nodded. "Let's travel together for the time being." "Good. You made the right decision, Zion." 13 had a feeling that the drow was just making an excuse. But he also wanted to know her true intentions, so he decided to just accept her proposal to travel together. Adira was a champion and a powerful one at that. If she really wished to cause trouble for 13 and his people, they would have a very hard time fighting against her even if they had the advantage in numbers. Since the drow had never shown any signs of malice or hostility toward him, 13 believed that she was traveling with them for a reason. An hour later, they encountered a horde of robust bison. The one leading the herd was a rank 4 black alpha bison, and its gaze was locked onto the wagons traveling near their herd, ready to attack if it saw any signs of hostility from them. 13 had no intention of attacking the bison, so he asked Christopher, who was driving the wagon, to distance themselves from the herd. Their destination was the northwestern region of the Warzer Plains, where the monsters he was targeting were located. These monsters were the Warzer black hounds, obsidian tiger beetles, and the red-eyed salamander, which were all rank 3 monsters. 13 planned to hunt the hounds because of their long hairs, which he could use for the bowstring of his bow. Aside from that, their fur was highly sought after by craftsmen and tailors since they could be used to create high-quality clothes and studded armor that were very comfortable to wear. These monsters were fast and very cunning. Although their offensive power wasn't that high, their speed and cunning made them very formidable opponents. What was worse was that these monsters wouldn't hesitate to flee if they felt that they were outmatched or suffered any kind of serious injury. This made them much harder to catch and kill, resulting in their monster parts being one of the most expensive items in the barbarian cities. The second monster was the obsidian tiger beetles. If the Warzer black hounds specialized in speed, these beetles specialized in defense. Their shells were extremely hard, making them ideal materials for making plate armor and shields. However, 13 didn't have a fire strong enough to melt the shell of the obsidian tiger beetle, which was why he intended to at least hunt one red-eyed salamander. He planned to capture it and bring this back to Groner City, allowing the slave master, Norris, to turn it into one of 13's beast slaves. There were other monsters that he would like to hunt, but Visago had warned him that the war could start in a month's time. Although the possibility of a great battle was still a month away, that didn't mean that the Tigerkins would wait until that time to send out scouting parties, which were likely capable of killing the hunting parties that they met in the Warzer Plains. Wanting to lower the risk of encountering these scouting teams, 13 decided to head to the northwest regions of the Warzer Plains, which was a distance away from the borders of the barbarian territories. However, this was also a risky move because the location where they were heading was near the domain of the golden-eyed hyenas. These monsters were jinns who loved to eat human flesh. Jinns were stronger than ordinary monsters, making them a very serious threat to his hunting party. However, 13 wasn't too worried. He had armed everyone to the teeth, and all of their arrows were coated in the poison of the yellow-striped dusk brute. Aside from that, he also had 2 quivers filled with arrows, which were coated by the venom of the desert scorpion that had very strong paralyzing properties. 13 planned to use these arrows against the Warzer black hounds and the red-eyed salamander in order to increase their chances of capturing them. Last but not the least, he had a quiver full of orichalcon arrows that were coated by Tiona's venom. This was his trump card for a situation where they happened to face a very strong monster that they couldn't hope to defeat even if they all worked together. The poison of the Domini Mortis was more potent than the yellow-striped Dusk Brute. It might not instantly kill stronger monsters, but its venom would still spread inside their bodies, weakening them from the inside out. The poison that had troubled Lady Callista for many years had a property similar to Tiona's venom. The only difference was that the venom of the Domini Mortis was stronger, making the rank of its target deteriorate faster. Simply put, if it had been Tiona who had bitten Lady Callista, she would have died before a year was over unless she was able to take an antidote specially made to counter the black snake's poison, which currently didn't exist in the world of Solterra. It was also for this very reason that Jasmine and Ariel both had pale expressions on their faces as they looked at the 7-year-old, who had just given Tiona the order to bite his left shoulder. "Bite me here, Tiona," 13 ordered as he pointed to his left shoulder. The black snake shook her head, defying her master's order for the first time. "Don't worry, it's going to be fine," 13 replied. "Last night, I asked to collect your venom, right? I brewed a special potion that will help increase my resistance to poison. I won't die from a single bite, probably." Tiona hissed angrily at the 7-year-old before flicking her forked tongue at her master's nose as if telling him that there was no way she would do such a thing. "Okay, how about this? Just limit your poison to 1 drop only." 13 raised a single finger as if trying to compromise with the angry little snake. Tiona once again shook her head before slithering inside 13's clothes, no longer wanting to continue the conversation. 13 sighed because his beast companion refused to cooperate. He was serious when he said that he was trying to build his resistance against poison. With the most venomous snake beside him, how could he not be tempted to court death when he was certain that he wouldn't die? Although he might experience extreme pain when the Domini Mortis poison spread inside his body, he was confident that the potion he had made, which included Tiona's venom as an ingredient, would help neutralize the effect of the poison. Unfortunately for the 7-year-old, the black snake refused to cooperate. On the contrary, this made Jasmine and Ariel sigh in relief. Unlike the other Tigerkins, the two of them didn't hold any grudge or animosity against the 7-year-old. In fact, they were even thankful that the one who bought them was Christopher. If they had been bought by other people, especially those who had a unique taste for beastkins, the two of them might have suffered fates worse than death. Both of them knew how much Christopher respected and admired the 7-year-old, so they knew that the chubby boy would be heartbroken if anything happened to him. They had already seen how sad and depressed Christopher was when the 2 ogres that he bought had died at the paws of the purple-furred honey badger. They didn't want to see him suffer again. Suddenly, Giga Chad, who was currently serving as 13's cushion, raised his head and gave a low screech. "Christopher, stop the wagon and summon Brutus and Bruno," 13 ordered before moving to the rear of the wagon. He then made several hand signals to the other wagons, telling them to prepare for battle and get into the formation they had agreed on beforehand. Adira, who was reading a book inside her carriage, smiled faintly and nodded her head in approval. She had already sensed that there were 6 rank 3 monsters approaching them from behind, but she didn't do anything to warn Zion's group about it. The true reason why the drow decided to join them in their hunt was to determine how capable the younger boy was as a leader of a hunting party. "They're almost here," Adira mused as she closed the book in her hands. "Now, show me how good you are at commanding your people, Zion." The 7 wagons belonging to 13's hunting group positioned themselves in a V formation. This was to help create a defensive wall at their front, while all their fighters exit from the back. 13 and Giga Chad stood at the center of the formation, while 01 and 02 stood at the very front, holding their jagged steel swords, which Bruno had crafted as part of his training. Although they didn't really look like a sword and more like big chunks of metal with a handle, they were still very dangerous weapons in the hands of 2 rank 3 ogres who specialized in brute strength. The trolls spread out, with 6 of them holding swords and shields, flanking the 2 ogres on the sides. The 4 remaining trolls knocked their arrows on their bows, ready to fire at a moment's notice. Percival's party also positioned themselves beside 13, serving as his protectors in case their enemy managed to breach the defensive line of the 2 ogres and the trolls. At the very rear of the formation was a pale-faced Christopher, who was guarded by Brutus, Bruno, Jasmine, and Ariel, who were determined to defend their master from those who wished him harm. Dire wolves, 13 muttered as he looked at the 2-meter-tall gray wolves, which specialized in hunting in packs. There might be others hiding nearby. Suddenly, Visago, who was circling above their wagons, shouted. 3 more coming from the right side. Visago shouted. I repeat, 3 more coming from the right side. The Poco had scouted ahead earlier to check if there were dangerous monsters in front of them. Because of this, Visago hadn't been present to warn his master that they were being stalked from behind. Fortunately, he had returned at the right moment to warn the younger boy that more monsters were coming, allowing 13 to come up with a plan in mere seconds. Execute deformation. 13 shouted. After hearing his orders, 01 and 02, as well as the trolls, all stepped to the side, creating an opening at the center of their formation. Perhaps knowing that their sneak attack had been compromised, the 6 dire wolves charged forward with the intention of overpowering their opponents with their speed and teamwork. However, 13 had already anticipated that they would go for an all-out frontal attack. As soon as the ogres and trolls created an opening, the dire wolves immediately found themselves coming face to face with a yellow spray that splashed on their faces. Giga Chad's stink spray had 2 special effects. The first one was the otherworldly smell that was enough to drive monsters crazy due to how smelly it was. The second effect, which the Chad skunk could freely control, was a special irritant that was similar to pepper spray. Once it hit its target, it would cause irritation and inflammation. If the stink spray happened to hit the target's face, it was very possible to cause a boiling sensation, severe discomfort, and temporary blindness to the eyes. Giga Chad had deliberately reduced the effect of his stink spray when he used it to neutralize Percival and the other tigerkin, who dared to annoy his master. In short, both of them only got the nerfed version of the Chad skunk's main arsenal. Even 13 wasn't cruel enough to make the 2 tigerkins suffer a traumatic experience that they would carry for the rest of their lives. Unfortunately for the dire wolves, Giga Chad didn't hold back and gave them the full version of his stink spray, making them all writhe and yelp in pain. Charge! 13 ordered. Immediately 0102 and the 6 trolls charged at the disoriented dire wolves, who had completely lost their sense of sight and smell. 13 then knocked an arrow on his bow and fired to his right side, using Visago to guide his arrows. Since the wagons were blocking the 3 dire wolves' line of sight, they didn't know that they had already been targeted by the 7-year-old, who had already mastered the martial skill cheap shot savant. He didn't hesitate to use the arrows that were coated by Tiona's poison because he didn't dare underestimate the strength of rank 3 monsters. These arrows were made from orichalcum, making them stronger than the rest of the arrows in his arsenal. The 3 dire wolves only heard the rustling of wind before finding 3 arrows impaling their bodies. Tiona's poison was extremely potent. However, their opponents were rank 3 monsters, so it would take a while before the poison took full effect. Brutus, Bruno to the right. 13 ordered. Tyga, get ready to intercept. Focus on only one target. Christopher, behind me. T7, assist Brutus. T9, T10, assist Bruno. Everyone brace. As soon as 13 finished his orders, 3 dire wolves jumped over their wagons with their jaws opened wide. What met them were 3 arrows flying straight toward their heads, which 13 had released the moment they appeared in his line of sight. The dire pack had noticed the wagons that were traveling deeper into the Warzer plains. Because of this, they devised a plan to attack it in 2 locations, one at the back and the other on the side. This way, the 3 dire wolves on the side would take advantage of the chaos, allowing them to deal a decisive blow to their prey. It was a sound plan that would guarantee a successful hunt. This wasn't the first time that the dire wolves had used such a strategy. Unfortunately for them, the 6 dire wolves were up against a creature that they had never encountered in their lifetime. Because of this, they were ill-prepared to handle the consequences of their frontal assault, which ended up in disaster. Since Giga Chad didn't hold back when unleashing his Giga Destroyer, the 6 dire wolves found themselves temporarily blinded and wheezing due to the potency of the Chad skunk's main arsenal. 01, 02, as well as T1 up to T6, didn't miss this opportunity and charged at the crippled wolves, who were unable to see and smell. They already knew how foul-smelling Giga Chad's stink spray was. But this was the first time they saw it being used during real battles. Although they didn't want to admit it, they were relieved that the Chad skunk was their ally and not their enemy. The nearest dire wolf yelped in pain as O1's jagged sword connected with the side of its face, making it skid on the ground. The dire wolf's face turned into a bloody mess, but it didn't die instantly. However, being alive didn't mean that it didn't suffer any serious injuries from the full-powered blow of a rank 3 ogre. O2, on the other hand, did as O1 did and smashed the second dire wolf on top of the head. The ogre had held his weapon with both hands, increasing its power. A resounding crack was heard as the sword slammed on the wolf's head, breaking its skull. The dire wolf didn't even see it coming and only felt a hard impact on its head, making it stagger and collapse on the ground. Seeing that its target was still alive, albeit barely, O2 once again raised its jagged sword and swung it repeatedly. Blood dyed the ground red as the dire wolf was nearly beaten to death. However, before O2 could give the finishing blow, 13 ordered it to target the other wolves before they could escape. It was at this moment that the 3 dire wolves leaped over the wagons and met 13's 3 arrows that he had unleashed from several meters away. His arrows embedded themselves on the front legs of his targets. However, the 3 wolves seemed to be unaffected by 13's arrows. Even so, the young boy wasn't discouraged as he barked an order to Christopher. "Christopher, kill the dire wolf that O2 had left alone," 13 ordered as he knocked a single arrow into his bow. "Jasmine, Ariel, protect him. Now go!" 13's shout brought Christopher out of his daze. The chubby boy hurriedly charged toward the fallen wolf and raised the steel spear that the younger boy had made for him. This spear was coated with the poison of the yellow-striped dusk brute, containing a powerful poison. The 7-year-old had instructed everyone that no matter what happened, they were not allowed to deal the final blow to the monster. The one who would kill them was Christopher. O2 had momentarily forgotten this when he was fighting against his opponent, so this time, instead of targeting the dire wolf's head, it slashed downwards, targeting its leg, to cripple it. Then T1, who was leading the other trolls, had long used this strategy. Each troll targeted a dire wolf's leg, crippling them. They moved fast as a single unit, and the moment the wolf had collapsed on the ground, they would move to the next one. While the ogres and the 6 trolls were busy dealing with the vanguard of the pack, 13, Brutus, Bruno, Percival, and their teammates were busy dealing with the 3 dire wolves that had tried to sneak attack them from the side. Bruno had met the charge of one of the wolves, specifically the one who had 2 arrows sticking out of its body. In terms of raw power, the ogre was slightly stronger than the dire wolf, so the moment the two clashed, the one who got pushed back was the wolf. Brutus, on the other hand, raised his steel shield and slammed it into the second wolf's face. The sound of metal and razor-sharp teeth rang out in the surroundings. Although the dire wolf was mostly unhurt, this clash stopped the dire wolf's momentum, allowing Brutus and the 2 trolls, who had come to assist him, to use their swords and round shields to keep the monster at bay. All 3 of them were rank 2 monsters, so even if the dire wolf was a rank 3 monster, they would be safe as long as they fought it defensively. Their goal wasn't to kill it but to stall for time until their comrades were done dispatching the 6 other dire wolves behind them. As long as they endured, they believed that they would be able to overcome their current predicament when their reinforcements arrived. Percival gritted his teeth as he and the 5 other tigerkins engaged the 3rd dire wolf. Among the forces under 13's command, they were the ones who were in a bad position. 2 of the tigerkins were rank 2, while the rest were rank 1. One of the girls was sent flying when the dire wolf swiped her away with its paws. Fortunately, she was able to raise her shield on time, which minimized the damage that she received. Even so, she now lay on the ground, with blood seeping out from the corner of her lips. However, her sacrifice wasn't in vain. Just as the dire wolf had sent her flying, 13's arrow flew toward the wolf's eye, drawing blood. A howl filled with pain and anger reverberated in the surroundings as the wolf's gaze locked on the small boy in the distance, who had already knocked another arrow on his bow, ready to fire at the next opportunity. Perhaps, knowing that 13's threat was greater than the rest, the dire wolf jumped over Percival and his teammates with the intention of charging in the boy's direction. Adira, who had already disembarked on her carriage to watch the battle, took a step forward. Her purpose for accompanying Zion on his hunt was to ensure that he was safe from harm. Seeing that the dire wolf had now shifted into targeting him, the drow had finally decided to make her move. But just as she decided to intervene, something black and furry stood between the boy and the dire wolf. Giga Chad screeched as it raised its paws to fend off the dire wolf's attack. Although it was a herbivore, it didn't mean that it didn't have the means of defending itself aside from its stink spray. The sound of rustling wind also reached the drow's ears, as the Poco in the sky made a nosedive, ready to use its claws to scratch the wolf's face in order to protect his master, whom he vowed to serve for the next 3 years of his life. The Chad skunk's sharp claws collided with the dire wolf's jaws, sending sparks flying at the point of impact. The herbivores in Solterra were often hunted by predators, but this didn't mean that they didn't have the means to protect themselves. Even a water buffalo could gouge a lion with its horns if pushed into a corner, and the Chad skunk had evolved to the point where it could stand on its hind legs like a bear and fight at close combat if the predator was able to withstand its stink spray. Since his teammates were fighting in close quarters, Giga Chad was unable to unleash his stink spray at the 3 dire wolves that attacked them from the side. Because of this, he stayed by 13's side, ready to protect his master as a last resort. Chad skunks were not aggressive creatures, but when they needed to fight, they fought like bears. After blocking the dire wolf's first assault, Giga Chad screeched as it prepared to lunge at its enemy. But just as it was about to initiate its attack, it saw a blur appear at the corner of its eye. A second later, the dire wolf yelped as Visego's claws scratched its eyes. 13 didn't miss this opportunity as he released the arrow in his hand. The arrow flew under Chad skunk's arm and entered the dire wolf's jaw, embedding itself on the monster's throat. Before the wolf could even howl in pain, the Chad skunk's claws descended, hitting the side of its face, making it stagger. Another arrow flew past the skunk's left shoulder, embedding itself once more in the monster's throat. A few seconds later, razor-sharp claws scratched the monster's neck, drawing blood. It was a very bloody scene, but Adira could only smile and appreciate the carnage that was happening in front of her. 13 shifted his attention to the other wolves in the battlefield, and sighed with relief when he saw that 01, 02, T1, up to T6, had already neutralized the 6 wolves, with 2 of them dying in Christopher's hands. "Christopher, come here," 13 ordered, making the chubby boy, who was about to kill another crippled wolf, halt his movements. Christopher had known by now to never question his young master's orders. If Zion ordered him to jump, he would jump. If he was ordered to kill, he would kill. Jasmine and Ariel, who were serving as Christopher's bodyguards, ran alongside him. 01 and 02 were already running alongside the other trolls to help Brutus and Bruno with the wolves they were fighting against. The moment their reinforcements came, the battle became one-sided with Christopher dealing the final blow to the 3 dire wolves. After the 3 wolves died, 13 ordered the trolls to tie up the legs and the mouths of the 4 surviving wolves, preventing them from escaping. Their legs were all broken, but that didn't mean that they didn't pose a threat to them. Because of this, 13 didn't hesitate to shoot them with paralyzing arrows, sealing their fates. "Master, we did it." Christopher hugged the younger boy. He was quite happy after the intense battle ended in their victory. "Did you get anything after killing those 5 wolves?" 13 asked. "I got nothing," Christopher replied sadly. 13 sighed after hearing the chubby boy's reply. He already knew that Christopher wasn't that lucky when it came to item drops, so he had learned to accept it. Fortunately, 4 of these wolves are still alive, 13 thought. The 7-year-old thought long and hard if they should return to Groner City in order to hand over the wolves to Norris, so that he could put a slave tattoo on their foreheads. It was quite unfortunate, because if the bodies of the 5 wolves couldn't be sold because in just a few hours, their meat would rot and become poisonous. That was the after effect of Tiona's venom, which the dire wolves had ignored earlier. During the battle, Tiona's poison had spread itself inside the dire wolves' blood vessels, weakening them from the inside out. Although the wolves seemed fine on the surface, their reaction time, as well as their body's performance, had begun to deteriorate at a steady pace, allowing the weaker monsters to fight them on equal footing. The longer the battle progressed, the weaker the wolves became, which sealed their fates. In the end, their first battle was a resounding success, but it would have ended terribly if everyone didn't play their part well. Giga, Chad, and Visego were the VIPs, and 13 was very satisfied with their performance. He already had his eye on the Chad skunk because he understood its potential in battle. The creatures of the Valbera archipelago still hadn't met this creature, so they were ill-prepared when it came to facing it for the first time. Visego, on the other hand, was a very valuable scout, keeping watch on their surroundings and warning his master about potential threats. If the Poco didn't tell them that there were 3 other wolves who were planning a sneak attack to their right side, they might have been taken by complete surprise and suffered some casualties. Just as 13 was thinking of whether they should return to the city or not, Adira appeared beside him and tapped his right shoulder. "Do you want me to store these dire wolves inside cages?" Adira asked. "I can ask my coachman to bring them back to Norris, so you don't have to return to Groner City." Adira knew that Zion planned to head northwest in order to find the Warzer Black Hounds. Although the boy didn't say anything, the drow could tell that Zion had set a time limit to their hunt, so returning to the city was not an ideal scenario for him. Because of this, she decided to offer her assistance because she was impressed by the boy's ability to command his people. "Thank you for your offer, Lady Adira," 13 replied. "I would like to ask for your assistance in this matter." "Good." Adira nodded before taking out 4 black cubes from her storage ring. She threw these cubes at the 4 dire wolves, imprisoning them in steel cages with wheels. The drow then attached the cages to each other, forming something similar to a train before latching it on the carriage that she used. This was how Norris transported his captured slaves in the barbarian cities, allowing them to hunt any beasts they came across in the wild. "Well then, please take care of me for the time being, Zion," Adira said as soon as her carriage disappeared in the distance. "Since my ride is gone, I'll be traveling in your wagon for the time being." 13 already guessed that the drow's real intention was to observe him and his hunting party, and see how they would perform during battles. Since she didn't plan on getting in the way, he decided that it wouldn't hurt having her around. Also, he had a feeling that bringing her along would be more beneficial to their group in the long run, so he agreed to her request without much resistance. "All of you performed well," 13 said as he faced his people. "But this battle has proven that our teamwork still has flaws. This is perfectly understandable because this is the first time that we are fighting together. However, remember this, if you all don't want to die, don't let these small victories go to your head. All it takes is one mistake for all of you to lose your lives, so never lower your guard. The place where we will go is a very dangerous place, so I want everyone to obey my commands without question. A second of hesitation might cost you your lives, so remember to follow my orders accordingly, especially during battles." The boy then glanced at the corpses of the monsters on the ground and gave another order. "All the brutes and all the other trolls, start to dismantle these corpses and take what is valuable. All the cores will be given to Christopher. Last but not least, the meat is poisonous, so if you don't want to die, don't eat it. I'll give you an hour to finish this task." Visego, who was listening to 13's orders, flew up to the sky. He already knew the role he needed to play, so he didn't wait for the boy to order him to do anything. The 7-year-old then returned to the first wagon to rest, alongside Christopher, Adira, Jasmine, Ariel, and Giga Chad. This was their first battle in the Warzer Plains, and 13 knew that this was only the beginning. 3 days after the battle against the 9 dire wolves, the 7 wagons arrived at their destination. Christopher, who was seated at the coachman's seat, couldn't help but feel anxious as he stared at the vast expanse of land in front of him. The clouds in the sky cast a gray light on the surroundings, but even this light couldn't penetrate the darkness that extended for miles on end. "Furvus Grasslands," 13 muttered as his eyes scanned the land, where everything that grew was darker than black. Tiona eyed the surroundings and liked what she saw. In this kind of place, she would be nigh invisible and invincible, bringing death to those whom she wished to die. "This is a nice place," Adira said as she, too, looked at the grassland in front of her. Every blade of grass was the same color as her skin, and that pleased her eyes. Everyone disembarked from their wagons and glanced at the land in front of them. For a brief moment, they sensed the presence of countless life forms staring back at them. The moment you step into their territory, you will immediately stand out, Adira commented. Are you sure you still want to hunt in this place? Of course, 13 replied. Us standing out is actually a good thing, don't you think? Since we don't know where to find them, it will be easier to let them find us first. A sound statement. Adira nodded. So, what do you plan to do now? What else? 13 placed his hands on his waist. Set up camp, of course. An hour later, the group of people had placed the wagons around them, creating an encirclement to block the view of any creature watching them from the grasslands, as well as the plains behind their back. The campfire cracked merrily as 13 added another dried piece of log to keep it burning. Christopher, who was assigned to cook alongside Jasmine and Ariel, was busy adding ingredients to the pot. He planned to have stew for the night, which served as a reward after traveling for 3 days. During those 3 days, they made sure to steer clear of the herds as well as the predators targeting them. There were close encounters, but 13 managed to intimidate them by ordering everyone to blow the horns that he had prepared for the journey. The loud booming sound not only scared the herd animals, but also made the predators think twice about attacking them. An enemy that was unaware of a sneak attack was different from an enemy who knew that they were coming. Of course, before 13 ordered the blowing of horns, he would always consult Visago, who was circling around them. Noise not only scared animals, it also attracted them. There was a possibility that there were other hunting groups in the surroundings that would hear the horns. If they did manage to hear it, there was a possibility that they would send people to investigate. The last thing that 13 wanted was to fight against other hunting parties, as well as scouting parties of the Tigerkins who had already managed to infiltrate deep within the Warzer Plains. Although the possibility of this happening was small, 13 wasn't the type to dismiss such variables. While Christopher was busy cooking, the ogres and the trolls were busy digging holes in the ground. 13 had brought several shovels for this trip, and he made sure that all of them were used. Adira found all of this very amusing, so she asked the boy why he was asking the monsters to dig. I'm planning to build monster traps, 13 replied to Adira's question. Traps? Adira arched an eyebrow. You surely underestimate the monsters of this place. Do you really think that your traps will work on them when they can see your subordinates digging into the ground? Yes, 13 replied. The smarter they are, the more likely they will fall into the traps. I'd like to see if what you say will really come to pass. It will, Lady Adira. I'm sure of it. After that small exchange, 13 closed his eyes and meditated. There were still a few hours before sunset, and he believed that once it came, the surroundings would become pitch black. If the wagons hadn't been positioned to block the view of outsiders, their campfire would have been seen for miles on end, alerting the predators, which hunted during the night, to move to their location. Unlike the other ogres and trolls, Brutus and Bruno were now proficient in digging holes. With them taking the lead and giving orders, it was only a matter of time before they managed to dig holes around their camp. This would serve as their first line of defense against the threats that might attack them during the night. Almost all of the creatures that lived in the Furvus grasslands had dark vision. Dark vision allowed them to see in the darkness, which was their greatest strength in the Furvus grasslands. This meant that these monsters could see between 18 to 20 meters in front of them as if they were looking at a dimly lit place, even if there was no light source. If there was dim light, they would be able to see things as clear as day, which was very advantageous to them. The light of the moon and the stars couldn't penetrate the dark clouds that seemed to be permanently placed in the sky above the Furvus grasslands. Simply put, the moment the sun set, the world would be covered in eternal darkness, which would be unnerving for the people who weren't used to dark places. Fortunately, with the exception of 13 and Christopher, everyone in their team had dark vision. Even Visago could see in the darkness, for that was a trait of all Pokopokos. So do you plan to hunt tomorrow when the sun is up? Adira asked as Christopher respectfully passed her a bowl of hot stew. Why would I do that? 13 asked. Wouldn't it be better to hunt during the night? Adira arched an eyebrow as she looked at the 7-year-old, who had started to eat. Sensing her gaze, 13 decided to ignore her and continue to eat. As someone who could see during the night, Adira didn't know what the boy was thinking. However, she decided to not pry into the topic any longer and simply waited for Zion to show her what he meant when he said that it would be easier to hunt in the Furvus grasslands during the night rather than hunting those who lived in it during the day. 2 hours after sunset, the surroundings had become completely dark. Christopher felt suffocated by the darkness, so he asked Jasmine and Ariel to sit beside him as he tended the campfire. Unlike the 2 humans in their group, Adira, the ogres, the trolls, and the tigerkins were in their environment. They were creatures who could hunt whether it was day or night, so they weren't too bothered by the darkness around them. Even so, they had to admit that it was still unnerving since their vision could only extend up to 20 meters. Anything past that was hard to see, making them raise their guards. What they didn't know was that the monsters in the Furvus grasslands had an improved version of dark vision. Unlike the monsters who didn't live in their environment, the creatures of the grasslands could see up to 50 meters in front of them. That was more than twice the range of what the others could see, but this was not a problem for 13. After dinner, the boy went to the first wagon to make his preparations. "Brutus, light the fire in front of my wagon, then get away after it's done," 13 ordered as he began to assemble the weapon he had bought for the trip. Unlike the other wagons, which were parked sideways, the rear of 13's wagon was facing the grasslands. Slowly but surely, the boy assembled his secret weapon, which he had personally crafted for this trip. It was none other than a mounted crossbow with a scope. This crossbow could hit targets up to 100 meters with great accuracy. With this kind of weapon, 13 could hit his targets before they even knew what hit them. After mounting his crossbow properly, the boy put on a set of comfortable leather armor, which would help mitigate the crossbow's recoil. He then laid down in the wagon and adjusted the crude scope that he had made before they embarked on this trip. Visago, who already knew what to do, took off to the skies and circled around the camp. Giga Chad, who had accompanied the boy inside the wagon, laid beside 13 and kept the latter warm with his fur. The trolls, who were on guard duty, also knew what was happening. They remained in their position and kept an eye on their surroundings. Half an hour later, a whistling sound reached the boy's ears. "Right side," 13 mused as he moved his crossbow to the right and peered through its scope. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw an eye shine that belonged to a creature whose faintly glowing eyes allowed it to see in the darkness. 13 didn't know what kind of monster it was because the only thing he could see was the shine of its eyes. Even so, it was enough for him to lock on to its position. He watched as the beast slowly crawled in the direction of their camp like a moth that was attracted to an open flame. Although it was moving through the grass, it didn't make any sound, proving that it had perfected the art of hunting in the grasslands. However, the prey it had targeted was well aware of its approach and even planned to give him a very warm welcome. 13 smirked as his index finger rested on the trigger of his crossbow. He was letting the creature move a little closer so that the trolls wouldn't have to move far in order to retrieve it. The bolts he was using were dipped in the scorpion's venom, which had already been used up. He wasn't planning to kill the creature. What he hoped to do was capture it alive. His original plan was to directly kill the monsters in the Furvus grasslands and dismantle their bodies to get the important monster parts. However, after knowing that Adira could lock them up in cages, the 7-year-old thought that it was more profitable to capture them alive rather than kill them. When he deemed that the target was within his effective range, the boy pulled the trigger of the crossbow, which let out a faint thwack as the crossbolt was sent flying. Even though the monster heard the weird sound, it didn't know what it was. Because of this, it was already too late when something hit its chest area, making it howl in pain. Adira, who was seated on the roof of first wagon, saw the commotion in the distance and smiled. "He really came here to hunt at night," Adira mused. "Unbelievable." After securing a hit on the monster, Giga Chad yanked on the lever of the crossbow, allowing it to pull the string back in preparation for another shot. 13 had asked it to help him with the reloading operation earlier because it would be faster if they worked together. While this was happening, the 7-year-old had already placed another bolt on the crossbow and prepared to fire a second time. The beast that was hit by the bolt was surprised and confused, which prompted it to run away. Fortunately, the paralyzing poison of the desert scorpion was quick to take effect, allowing 13 to shoot another arrow, hitting the monster's back in the process. Since his target was still in his effective range, 13 didn't have a hard time landing his second shot. 0102 charge. As soon as 13 gave the order, the two ogres ran toward the grassland, holding torches in one hand and bone clubs in the other. Since they didn't plan to kill their target, they didn't bring their jagged swords and left them in the camp. When they arrived at their destination, the two ogres saw a rank 2 black panther, who seemed to only want to investigate their camp. Since it was already paralyzed, they had no trouble dragging it back to the camp. They presented its body to the 7-year-old, who had a disappointed look on his face. Too bad. It wasn't the black hound that you were looking for, Adira said while patting the 7-year-old's shoulder. Even so, this panther is still worth a decent amount of coins. So, not bad for your first hunt. Adira then casually tossed a black cube onto the panther, trapping it inside a cage, which the ogres moved to the rear of their camp. The other monsters who were paying close attention to 13's camp had no idea what had just happened. All of them hastily retreated when the two ogres came running in their direction. Although they didn't understand how the Black Panther was neutralized, they became wary about approaching the camp for the rest of the night. Because of this, the 7-year-old, who was very eager to catch another monster, gradually fell asleep, with his fingers still resting on the trigger of his crossbow. The sound of shovels digging into the ground could be heard around the camp. An hour after breakfast, 13 ordered all the slaves to start digging, with the exception of Jasmine and Ariel, who were under Christopher's command. Adira watched all of this with amusement because she still thought that this was just a waste of time. The boy didn't even bother to cover the holes on the ground, and she believed that no sane monster would fall into the 4-meter-deep holes that the other party had ordered to be dug. As usual, 13 had other thoughts in mind. What the drow thought wasn't wrong. In fact, she was right. But she was only right when it came to individual hunting. The purpose of the holes wasn't just to trap animals, but to serve as their line of defense if things went terribly wrong. Not all places around their temporary camp were dug out. 13 made sure that there was an undug path wide enough to let 2 wagons travel side by side, which was left like that on purpose. Just in case something unexpected happened, this could be used to make their escape. According to Visago, he had spotted several golden-eyed hyenas 5 miles away from their location. These were the jinns whose territory bordered the Furvus grasslands. 5 miles might seem like a great distance away, but when it came to monsters hunting in packs, this distance could be covered in just the span of a few hours. 13 didn't want to take any chances, so he was making a 100-meter defensive line, littered with 4-meter-deep holes. In normal circumstances, monsters wouldn't fall into these holes. But in not-so-normal circumstances, these uncovered traps, which Adira believed to be just a waste of time, would help stall the monsters while they made their escape. It was perfectly normal for the drow to think that she could escape easily. After all, she was a champion. However, 13 and Christopher were wanderers who still hadn't attained the rookie rank. They were very vulnerable, especially when facing rank 2 monsters and above that often hunted in packs. If it was just one monster, 13 could still deal with it. But a hunting pack was another matter. Even with Giga Chad on their side, the 7-year-old treated his enemies as cunning individuals who couldn't be underestimated. "Young master, there are monsters over there," Christopher pointed in the distance where 3 black rhinoceros were gathered. "Should we hunt them?" 13 glanced in the direction where Christopher was pointing and rubbed his chin. The 2 adult rhinoceros were both rank 3 monsters, and the baby was a rank 1 monster. If my guess is right, these rhinoceros fall under the category of brute monsters, 13 mused. However, after seeing that they had a baby in their group, the boy decided to let them be. He had a soft spot for children, even if they were monster children. "Don't bother targeting them," 13 stated. According to Lady Adira, she only has 6 more cages left. "We should focus on hunting the Warzer Black Hounds instead." Christopher nodded in understanding. Since his young master said that they shouldn't hunt the rhinos, then he would do as he says. Half a minute later, Visago landed on top of the first wagon and started to speak a bunch of nonsense. Everyone who heard it thought that the dumb bird had finally gone crazy, but 13 was deciphering what the Poco was trying to say. Rhino, Jaguar, Hounds 3, 7, 2. 8, none 1. Child, old, adults, fight, sleep. Danger, stranger, safe. North, south, northeast, southwest. Many, none, few. Taiga red but baboon. Shut up, you dumb bird. Percival shouted angrily before throwing a stone at the Poco, who managed to evade it in time. Murder! Murder! Help! Visago shouted before circling high in the sky, out of reach of Percival's stone throws. 13 pondered a bit after hearing Visago's report. They had agreed that if there were many people around them, they would speak in codes. To not make things difficult, they decided to make every 3 words the real message that the Poco needed to convey. In short, what Visago's message was. Hounds 2, 1, adults, sleep, safe, northeast, few. This meant that there was one black hound, who was sleeping, 2 miles away in the northeast direction, and it was safe to go because there were few monsters in the area. The taiga red but baboon part was just a smokescreen, and Visago's way of messing with the tigerkin, who was no challenge to anger. The reason why 13 was here in the Furvus Grasslands was to capture a Warzer Black Hound, which was a rank 3 monster. He knew that these monsters were very smart, and would run away as soon as they perceived a serious threat to their lives. Because of this, bringing a large group in order to hunt them was a very bad idea. The moment the Black Hound saw a group of monsters or people coming in its direction, it would immediately run away without a second thought. It only fought battles that it had a high chance of winning, so capturing them was extremely hard and frustrating. Giga, come with me, 13 ordered. The rest of you, continue digging and protect the camp while I am away. I will just go on a patrol to make sure that the area is safe. Adira watched the 7-year-old climb on the back of the Chad skunk before leaving their camp to head northeast. After pondering for a bit, a smile appeared on the drow's face as she sneakily followed the 7-year-old, who mentioned that he was only going out on patrol. The drow had already labeled Zion as a very mysterious boy who was full of surprises. She believed that there was a deeper meaning behind him going on patrol. The boy only brought Tiona and Giga with him, which didn't seem like a safe decision, especially in the Furvus Grasslands. Although the Poco seemed to be following the boy from the sky, Adira believed that Zion was up to something, and she wanted to know what that something was. Half an hour after leaving the camp, Visago whistled, telling 13 that someone was following him from behind. The boy didn't need to turn around to know who it was because this was all part of his plan. He knew that Adira was paying close attention to him, so he decided to go alone. If there was a champion following him, then he would have an easier time surviving if something unexpected came up. Also, Adira could easily take him to safety if he ever found himself in danger. Because of this, he took the best course of action and only traveled with Giga. The fewer people with him when he did his hunt, the more protected their camp would be against outside threats. Giga Chad would often glance in the sky to check the direction where the Poco was flying. Using the bird as a guide, the Chad skunk walked confidently across the grasslands. 13 was only using his bow and arrows this time because the mounted crossbow was too heavy for him to carry. Even so, he believed that with proper planning, he would be able to take down his target before anything else came his way. Several miles away from the Furvus Grasslands, a 5-meter-tall golden-eyed hyena opened its eyes. The hyenas around it started to make excited chuckling sounds. They were hoping that their leader would give them the order to raid the surrounding areas in order to bring more food to their den. The giant golden-eyed hyena was a rank 5 overlord, which was a rank weaker than the purple-furred honey badger. Even so, it was still a very terrifying monster and was as strong as a champion. The overlord of the jinns cackled, sending the other hyenas into a frenzy. It then stared towards the east and narrowed its eyes. It had sensed a powerful presence wandering along the borders of its domain. There was only one creature in the entirety of the Warzer Plains who could move unhindered wherever it wanted. Although the purple-furred honey badger was stronger, the golden-eyed hyena wasn't afraid. The members of its cackle were over 500, with 20 rank 4 monster under its command. There were also dozens of rank 3 monsters and hundreds of rank 2 monsters. With a small army at its beck and call, the overlord of the hyenas had nothing to fear. The purple-furred honey badger, on the other hand, didn't seem to care about the disparity in numbers. It went wherever it wanted to go, and those who blocked its way either became its food or food for the group of scavenging vultures that was following it in the sky, ready to get a free meal, without having to dirty their beaks and claws in the process. Giga Chad crouched low on the ground, using the tall blades of grass as cover. 13, who was mounted on his back, used his scope to take a closer look at the sleeping Warzer Black Hound in the distance. This monster had very strong detection ability. Similar to a dolphin, it only slept with half of its brain, leaving the other half alert, ready to wake the monster up in a hurry. Visego, who had taken a good look at the surroundings, landed beside 13 and nudged his cheek. This was his way of saying that aside from the drow, who was hiding a distance away from them, there were no other threats nearby. "I guess it's time to use our secret weapon," 13 muttered as he took out a water skin that was packed to the brim, not with water, but with Giga Chad's stink spray in liquid form. Giga Chad's spray wasn't really gaseous in nature. It was more of a liquid spray that disoriented any creature it hit, leaving them reeling in pain due to the irritants contained in the Chad skunk's foul-smelling weapon. "Drop it from a height of 100 meters, 13 ordered. "Make sure to target its head or its upper body. I'll handle the rest." Visego nodded and held the water skin firmly in its clawed feet. 13 then took out his bow and arrow, ready to start their operation. He pulled the string as far as he could, and focused on the task at hand. The Poco, who had also calculated the speed and location of where it would drop its payload, circled twice in the air to gather momentum. Upon seeing that the 7-year-old was ready, it released the water skin from its claws, making it descend at a rapid pace, heading straight towards the sleeping Black Hound. 13's gaze locked onto the falling water skin with a calm expression on his face. When he deemed that the time was right, he let go of the arrow in his hand, making it fly straight and true. The Black Hound was sensitive to anything that had locked onto it with killing intent. If there were any predator who had set their sight on it, it would know right away, which would prompt it to run away as fast as it could. However, Pocos were masters in the art of hiding their true characters and intentions. Because of this, even if Visego were to purposely aim at the sleeping Black Hound, its act was completely masked by the bird's ability to make anything it did, feel and look harmless. Not sensing any threat from the falling water skin from the sky, the Black Hound didn't even stir from its sleep. The water skin was made up of animal skin that would easily burst if dropped from a high place. As long as the Poco's aim was true, it would explode at the moment of impact. 13, who had released the arrow from his bow, was no different from the Poco. He had achieved a mastery of his senses, so he was capable of controlling his emotions as long as he put his full concentration into it. Anything that might prompt his target to react on an instinctual level, like killing intent, was deeply concealed, allowing his killer attacks to not have an ounce of killing intent in them. In short, he was the perfect assassin who could kill his targets as long as they didn't have powerful detection abilities, allowing his long-range attacks to bridge the gap between them. He had also timed his attack the moment the wind blew over the grassland, masking the sound of the arrow in its flight towards its target. Due to his great accuracy and timing, the arrow he released landed on his target at the same time the water skin landed on the Black Hound's face. 13's arrow landed on Black Hound's back and embedded itself firmly in it. The monster, who had suddenly been hit by 2 attacks at once, howled in pain as it tried to immediately stand up and run. But due to the fact that it was temporarily disoriented, it didn't know which direction it was running. The Black Hound wasn't aware that it was running straight in 13's direction, which was greatly advantageous to the latter. Drawing his bow, 13 rapidly fired arrows in quick succession, purposely hitting his target's chest while avoiding the vital parts. 13 planned to capture the Black Hound alive and was only using paralyzing arrows to restrict its movements. Due to it being disoriented, the Black Hound ignored the pain it was feeling and continued to run in one direction. Its logic was simple. As long as it ran, it would be able to escape whoever was attacking it. It didn't know that it was only offering itself up on a silver platter, unable to see that it had chosen the wrong direction to run in. After firing 6 arrows, the black hound ran past 13 only to collapse on the ground after Giga Chad extended its feet to trip the hound's legs, making it skid on the ground for several meters before coming to a complete stop. It had tried to stand up, but the effect of the paralyzing venom had finally taken hold of its body. Just as 13 was planning to tie the black hound's legs with the rope that he had stored inside his storage dimension, he heard someone clapping in the distance. "Marvelous," Adira said with a satisfied look on her face. "I knew it. You didn't just come on a casual patrol. You and that Poco understand each other perfectly. If Norris were to discover that you have successfully tamed that dumb bird, I'm sure that he would ask you for the method for how you managed to do it." 13 was unfazed by Adira's words and even tilted his head in confusion. "What are you talking about, Lady Adira?" 13 asked in confusion. "Haha, very well, I will keep your secret for you." Adira brushed off the boy's attempt to make himself look innocent. But these kinds of tricks wouldn't work on her. "So, do you want me to help you?" Adira asked. "Yes, please," 13 replied in a heartbeat. The drow nodded and casually threw a black cube at the fallen monster, which immediately transformed into a steel cage with wheels. 13 then tied the cage to Giga Chad's body, allowing the Chad skunk to pull their quarry back to their camp. Adira also mounted Giga Chad's back, and even hugged 13 from behind, prompting Tiona to hiss at her. "Calm down, Dona," Adira said. "I won't steal your master from you. At least, not yet." 13, who understood that Adira was a reliable ally, told Tiona not to bite the drow, and also added the phrase, "at least not yet," in the end, which made the drow giggle. They were not aware that several miles away from them, a confrontation between the two overlords was about to take place. A confrontation that would have dire consequences for the 7-year-old's hunting group, who had no idea that they were about to be sandwiched in a territorial battle between two powerhouses, who treated the Warzer Plains as their personal hunting grounds. The Warzer Black Hound, which was locked up inside the cage, growled at the 7-year-old, who was looking at it with an amused look on his face. Ever since 13's group returned to the base, the child had been looking at the rank 3 monster, admiring its long, silky hair. He had asked for Adira's help in plucking one of its hairs so that he could change the string of his bow to something more powerful. After the hound's hair was attached, 13 tested it immediately to test the effective range of his attacks. Due to his small body and current strength, 13 couldn't draw the bowstring to its fullest capacity, allowing his maximum range to only hit up to 300 meters. However, if he embedded the end of the bow to the ground, using it as support, and leaned his body as far as he could, his arrow could fly up to 700 meters, without a problem. Now that he had found one of the creatures he was looking for, he intended to hunt the 2 other monsters on his list, the obsidian black beetle, which usually hunted at night, and the red-eyed salamander, which hunted during the day. "You don't like me, do you?" 13 asked the black hound, whose growl was making Christopher feel very anxious. "Growling? I see. I'll make you like me soon." 13 chuckled. "Giga, fire away." The Chad skunk turned around and raised its tail, making the black hound's hair all stand up on end. A moment later, a vile spray hit the helpless monster who was trapped inside the cage, making it roar in anger and frustration. Giga Chad didn't add any irritants to his attack this time. He only used his stink spray, which was more than enough to make a creature that had a very strong sense of smell suffer terribly. Percival and the other tigerkin, whom 13 named P1, could only look at the rank 3 monster with pity. After all, it was up against a boy who was worse than a devil. After getting a dose of Giga Chad's smelly fart, the poor hound desperately howled repeatedly as if telling all the monsters in the surroundings to not allow themselves to be captured by the bastardly little boy, who was clearly enjoying its suffering. "You and I will get along, Zion," Adira said. "Both you and I like to make others suffer." 13 neither denied nor confirmed Adira's statement because he did what he needed to do in order to achieve the goal that he had set out to do. "Young master, they're almost done with the digging," Christopher reported after checking the progress of the slaves. "What should I tell them after they're done?" "Tell them to eat and rest for a few hours," 13 replied. They'll need the strength just in case some nasty buggers creep toward our camp tonight. The 7-year-old was making the Warzer Black Hound howl on purpose. It scared off the small fries while getting the attention of other black hounds in the surroundings, hitting 2 birds with 1 stone. These monsters had a strong bond with each other, so if one of them were hurt or captured, the others would try to at least see if they could rescue them. The black hound was very smart, but it was facing an opponent that it had never encountered before. The mental trauma that 13 was inflicting on it was enough to make it lose its mind and ask for its brethren's help, drawing it closer to the boy's trap. But it was not only the Warzer black hounds that the howling was attracting. It was also attracting something else, something that 13 had already thought to be possible but still took the chance to draw in. Visago, who was currently circling the skies and eyeing their surroundings, was looking for a particular monster that might pose great trouble to their party. It was none other than the golden-eyed hyenas, who also frequented the Furvus grasslands to hunt for prey. Unlike the other normal monsters, 13 had no intention of capturing them. No, he planned to let Christopher kill them. Jinns are the natural enemy of wanderers. Although the chubby boy's drop rate was very low when fighting against regular monsters, there would be a substantial increase in his drop rate when fighting against jinns, as long as their ranks weren't that far apart. Wanderers hunting low-ranked jinns would not benefit from these item drops. But wanderers hunting jinns whose ranks were higher than theirs was a different story. With Christopher still not stepping into the threshold of a rookie, it was possible for him to get a 50-50 chance of acquiring an item after killing a rank 2 or rank 3 jinn. In the end, 13th's true subordinate was Christopher, not Rihanna. He didn't know Rihanna's background, so he couldn't trust her fully. However, that didn't mean that he would not share with her the spoils of his hunt. In fact, if not for the fact that she was busy leading her hunting party, 13 would have brought her with him and allowed her to land the killing blow on the monsters that they would hunt because her luck was higher than Christopher's. Also, Rihanna wasn't greedy. The 7-year-old knew that she would gladly hand over any items that she received from the hunt as long as he asked nicely. It's quite unfortunate that she needed to lead Harry and the others, 13 thought. Still, I pity him. Those 3 stooges will definitely think of him as their rival for Rihanna's affection. 13 had been there when Rihanna's hunting party was about to head to the Houdini Desert. Rufus, Aaron, and Jean were giving Harry the "don't even think about getting close to her" gaze when the scion from the Remington family joined them for an expedition. Rihanna is getting too popular with the boys, 13 chuckled internally. This is a good thing. It will be easier to make them follow orders this way. The 7-year-old then whispered something in Giga Chad's ear, making the Chad skunk nod its head in understanding. It then walked toward the cage of the Warzer Black Hound, the sight of which made the rank 3 monster panic. Its howls became louder and more desperate as it shouted for its comrades' help. Since the Furvus grasslands was mostly quiet, with all the creatures living in it having mastered the art of being low-key, the Black Hound's call for help could be heard from more than a mile away. Soon, several monsters slowly made their way toward the location of 13th's camp, and their movements didn't escape the eyes of the Poco, who was now on his way back to his master to report the approach of the guests who were coming to join them for an early dinner. It worked better than I thought, 13 thought after hearing Visago's report. There was both good and bad news. The good news was that there were now 4 Warzer Black Hounds heading in their direction. The bad news was that the Black Hound's cries for help had also attracted 3 groups of hyenas, each with 3 members. Among those 3 groups of hyenas, there was one group with a rank 4 monster, who seemed to be their leader. Unlike wolves who hunted in packs, hyenas could hunt solo. However, when targeting bigger games, they would form groups. They were very social animals as well, and working together in groups was not a problem for them. The Warzer Black Hounds were fast and agile, while the golden-eyed hyenas were all-rounders. While they were not as fast as the Black Hounds, their bite force was stronger than the regular monsters that lived in the Warzer plains. Also, their bodies were surprisingly sturdy, allowing them to take hits from stronger monsters. 13 knew that fighting against 9 golden-eyed hyenas, led by a rank 4 monster, was not going to be an easy battle. Giga Chad's stink spray might be potent, but some jinns could ignore the stench as well as the irritants it contained. The hyenas didn't mind eating rotting flesh, so something foul-smelling didn't deter them in the slightest. "Listen and listen well," 13 said when all the members of his hunting party had gathered. Using a stick, he drew several circles on the ground, making sure to make the position as accurate as possible based on Visego's report. "Currently, there are 4 groups of monsters heading in our direction," 13 stated as he pointed at the circles that he had created. "The first group is composed of 4 Warzer Black Hounds, which are all rank 3 monsters. The 3 other groups are composed of golden-eyed hyenas, which are led by a rank 4 monster, while the rest are all rank 3 monsters. The Black Hound's goal is to free their brethren from the cage, while the hyena's goal is to have us for their early dinner. Both groups are dangerous, and their target is us." The faces of the trolls, ogres, as well as tigerkins turned grim when they heard the types of monsters that they would be fighting against. "The only silver lining is that you have managed to finish digging the holes around our base," 13 said with a smile. "Although golden-eyed hyenas can jump, they can't jump very high. If they try to jump over the hole we made, they will fall without fail." The group was able to sigh in relief after hearing 13's assurance, knowing that aside from the path that they had created to allow their escape, all the places around their camp were littered with holes that were 4 meters deep. If the golden-eyed hyenas were to fall into them, they would not be getting out of it, making them easy prey for 13's subordinates. "Move the wagons to block the path that we have made," 13 ordered. "These monsters are smart, so they will, without a doubt, find this path. As long as we line up our wagons in that location, it will be harder for them to reach the center of our formation, giving us plenty of time to hit them with ranged weapons." 13's gaze then landed on the drow, who was busy filing her nails. "I'm not going to help you, okay?" Lady Adira replied without even lifting her head to look at the boy. "I'm just a spectator. Even if most of you die, I will not offer my assistance, so keep that in mind." 13 nodded in understanding because he wasn't really expecting any help from the drow. He only looked in her direction to know if she was going to take action or not so that he could put that consideration into his plans. "Our strategy is going to be simple," 13 said with a smile. "We are going to stand our ground. 01, 02, and Bruno, the 3 of you will be using the big shields that we have brought for this occasion. Your goal is to push the monsters into the traps that you have dug. Also, whatever happens, pay attention to your surroundings. Anyone who accidentally falls in the traps will have a dose of Giga Chad's Giga Destroyer, so keep that in mind." Everyone's body shuddered after hearing the 7-year-old's threat. Giga Chad's stink spray was so strong that the stench would only go away after 3 days. Taiga and the tigerkin, P1, were forced to sleep outside of the warehouse because both of them smelled so bad that 13 didn't hesitate to kick them out. This threat was so effective that even the dumb ogres took 13's words seriously. Taiga, Jasmine, Ariel, P4, and P5, the 5 of you will use bows and focus your attention on the Warzer Blackhounds if they attack us before the hyenas arrive, 13 ordered. T6, T7, T8, T9, and T10, the 5 of you will focus on targeting the hyenas with bows once they come within your strike range. 13 then shifted his attention to Christopher, who was looking at his young master with a solemn expression on his face. "Christopher, you will be using the mounted crossbow. Only fire when I tell you to do it." "Yes, young master." Since he had planned to let Christopher take the last hit for the monsters, he had also taught him how to use the mounted crossbow. Unlike bows and arrows that were hard for amateurs to use, the mounted crossbow was quite straightforward and more stable. The chubby boy had an easier time learning how to use it compared to using the bow. "Now move the wagons," 13 commanded. "We need to block the pathway before our guests arrive." After giving his order, everyone went to perform the tasks that were assigned to them. They had unloaded their weapons and placed them in the center of their camp, allowing them easy access to their supplies. Adira watched the hustle and bustle without saying anything. But she couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling that she was having. As a champion who had fought many life and death battles, her sixth sense would usually warn her if something big was about to happen. Although it was faint, her instincts were warning her that something dangerous was going to happen soon. She was currently debating whether she should tell the 7-year-old who was the leader of the group about her bad feelings. However, Thinking that Zion would just think that she was overthinking things, she decided to keep her silence and make her own preparations just in case her bad premonition became a reality. 13 ordered everyone to have a light dinner early because they might not have any time to eat later once their guests arrived. When they were done, they quickly got into position and kept their eyes peeled, looking at the darkness around them, hoping to catch a glimpse of the monsters that were hiding in the dark. Half an hour later, their guests finally made their presence known. 13 and his subordinates didn't see them. Instead, they heard them. The creepy laughter of the hyenas reverberated in the dark night, making almost everyone, with the exception of 13 and Adira, feel their hearts shudder. There was an eerie, disturbing air about the laughter of the golden-eyed hyenas, which made even the fearsome ogres hold the shields in their hands more tightly. These hyenas were no ordinary monsters. They were jinns, and the reason for their laughter was likely the presence of their most favorite prey. Humans, and not just any ordinary humans but wanderers. Jinns love to eat humans. It was for this reason that they would often attack cities. Through it, they would have their fill of human flesh. Whenever they sensed a hunting party composed of barbarians, they would make a beeline in their direction, with the intention of feasting on their flesh and satisfying their bestial instincts. "Calm down, Christopher," 13 said as he patted the shoulder of the chubby boy, who seemed to be hyperventilating due to anxiety and fear. "I'm here. I won't let them kill you." "Thank you, young master," Christopher replied as he forcefully tried to calm himself down. The chubby boy had faced monsters before, so he didn't understand why he was having a panic attack. 13 knew the reason, but he kept his silence. Christopher's uncontrollable discomfort was a wanderer's natural reaction when facing a jinn for the first time. It was part of the law of wanderers that the one had created for those who would travel to Solterra for the first time, allowing them to know who their mortal enemies were and the foes they needed to overcome. Half a minute later, the hooting of an owl reached everyone's ears. There were no owls in the Grasslands, but there was a Poco who could imitate any sound and voice as long as he heard it at least once. This hooting was part of the coded message that Visego and 13 had agreed upon, which informed the young boy that the monsters had started to encircle their camp. The hyenas' laughter earlier had scared away most of the monsters near 13's camp, with the exception of the Warzer Black Hounds. The 3 Black Hounds, who also had arrived near 13's camp, were paying close attention to the situation, which they would use to their advantage to free their brethren. Of course, they made sure to distance themselves from the golden-eyed hyenas, for they knew how dangerous those monsters were. Although they were fast and could run away before the hyenas could get to them, they were still hesitant to come too close to these creepy monsters because the jinns were stronger than them. "They have started to spread out," 13 said before ordering Bruno to start throwing the torches that they had prepared outside of the 100-meter protective perimeter that was littered with holes. The light from the fire would allow them to faintly catch a glimpse of their opponents, who were shrouded in darkness. Although the fur of the golden-eyed hyena wasn't pitch black like the other monsters in the Furvus Grasslands, the surroundings were still way too dark for them to pinpoint their location. The only way to know where they were was through the eye shine, which caused their eyes to glow in the dark. Fortunately, they managed to capture a Warzer Black Hound first, allowing them to use its long hairs to change their bowstrings, giving it a boost in range. The mounted crossbow that Christopher was going to use could now reach a target of up to 200 meters, which doubled its original range. While everyone was waiting, the laughter of the hyenas grew louder, indicating that they were getting closer to the camp. In time, 13 and the rest were able to see small golden glowing orbs in the distance, which were the eyes of the golden-eyed hyenas. Just like Visego had stated, these monsters had spread out to create an encirclement, but 13 wasn't too worried about the hyenas surrounding them. What he was paying close attention to was the location of the 4 wagons, which had been moved to block their path of escape. It was the only area where there were no traps laid out on the ground, making it the only safe place for the hyenas to traverse in order to reach them. 13 never underestimated his opponents, especially when one of them was a rank 4 jinn monster. Just like he expected, a golden-eyed hyena approached the location of the wagons, coming near the torches that Bruno had thrown on the ground. Everyone caught a glimpse of a monster that was over a meter tall, with a few red stripes on its golden coat. Its ears, muzzles, and throat were black in color, but its golden eyes, which were filled with mischief, eyed them from a distance. A moment later, laughter escaped its mouth, making all the other hyenas laugh with it. Without a doubt, this was the leader of the golden-eyed hyenas, who had come to feast on them. Giga Chad, who was right beside 13, became tense as the eyes of the rank 4 monster had locked onto his body while laughing creepily. "Don't worry, Giga." 13 patted the Chad skunk's neck, reassuring it that everything was going to be fine. "We'll kill it before it kills you." The Chad skunk whimpered, but it held its ground. Giga Chad was only a rank 2 monster, so feeling afraid of a stronger monster was only natural. 13 eyed the monster in the distance before lightly rubbing Tiona's neck. "Tiona, I'll leave that one to you," 13 said softly. "Be careful." The black snake nodded her head before crawling down from 13's body. It was time for her to help her master fight, which made Adira, who was watching nearby, look at the black snake in excitement. The Domini Mortis was the most poisonous snake in the world. Similar to her master, it was perpetually fated to remain a rank 1 monster throughout its lifetime. The reason why this happened was not because the gods, who once ruled Solterra, hated the Domini Mortis. In fact, they feared and respected it. There was even a saying in the ancient text of the scholars that if the Domini Mortis were allowed to raise their ranks, they would become the strongest monster in Solterra, without any other monster being their match. Tiona slithered silently into the night, disappearing into the darkness. If Adira were to offer her assistance, this battle would have been far easier. But since the drow had clearly stated that she would only observe them, 13 decided to let Tiona join the battle. The hyenas, who had also appeared outside the 100-meter defensive line, became confused because there were holes all over the place that they were unable to traverse. One of them even tried to jump over the hole, but since hyenas weren't really that good at jumping, it fell on the trap and was unable to extricate itself from it. 13 didn't place any spears to kill the monsters that would fall into the trap because there was no need for it. Tiona slithered in the direction of the fallen hyena in order to neutralize it. Although her poison wouldn't kill it instantly, repeated bites would make the monster weaker and weaker, disabling it from joining the battle. Although the Domini Mortis was only a rank 1 monster, and its foe was a rank 3 monster, which was stronger and bigger than her, the black snake wasn't worried. Just like the Chad skunk, Tiona had one other ability, and that was to unleash a poison spray at its target. The only con was that its range was very short and only reached up to a meter. However, that was enough to target the fallen hyena, who could do nothing but accept Tiona's one-sided attack, rendering it incapable of joining the battle ever again. When the black snake reached her destination, she saw the hyena trying to jump out of the hole, which was impossible for it to achieve. Since that was the case, Tiona didn't hesitate to open her jaws wide and unleash an inky and poisonous spray that hit the hyena's face dead center, causing it to howl in pain. After accomplishing her goal, she slithered away in order to approach the other hyenas. Using the darkness as her cover, she planned to wait for the perfect opportunity to strike. 13 allowed Tiona to join the battle because he needed all the help he could get. So when one of the 9 hyenas fell into the hole, the black snake decided to deal with it first, knowing that her master couldn't leave his spot since he was the commander of their unit. Right now, the greatest threat was the rank 4 hyena, who had realized that their encirclement was useless since they couldn't jump over the holes that littered the surrounding areas. Because of this, it made a whooping sound, calling all the other hyenas to gather at its location. The moment the hyenas gathered and blocked their only path of escape, the members of 13's hunting party turned tense. If the smallest thing went wrong, they would have no place to run. Even the Warzer black hound that was locked inside the cage could only whimper at the sight of the hyenas, who once again started to laugh as if telling the humans that they had seen through their little trick. 13, however, remained calm. How could he possibly not consider his opponent's obvious move of targeting the only place that would allow them to reach their prey? The rank 4 hyena wasn't in a hurry to attack. When its subordinates had gathered, it ordered them to attack the wagons that were blocking their way. At that exact moment, 13 dipped the arrow in his hand, which was wrapped in a cloth soaked in oil, into the campfire, igniting it. "Go, Giga!" 13 ordered. Immediately, The Chad skunk turned around and unleashed its full-powered stink spray that could reach up to 30 meters. Giga Chad couldn't always unleash a spray with this range because it needed a lot of preparation. At most, he could only unleash one of them every 15 minutes as he built up pressure inside his body, allowing his stink spray to reach farther. Everyone close your eyes and don't open them until I tell you so. 13 ordered. 13 only waited those few seconds before he calmly released the flaming arrow in his hands before he, too, closed his eyes. Christopher, who no longer questioned his master's orders, did as he was told and closed his eyes firmly. Percival also acted quickly and closed his eyes. The trolls and ogres did the same. Even Adira, who was the strongest among them, obediently closed her eyes because she took Zion's words very seriously. The only ones who didn't follow 13's order right away were the Tigerkins whom he had just bought as slaves not long ago. But 13 had no time to care whether they closed their eyes or not. He had shot his arrow at the exact moment when the last of the spray spilled from Giga Chad's butt. The younger boy didn't even need to look at the outcome of his action because he had already calculated things perfectly. The moment the flame arrow made contact with the stink spray, which had just reached the hyenas, it immediately combusted, creating a powerful explosion that engulfed the bodies of the hyenas in flames. For a brief moment, the darkness that surrounded them was pushed back by the blinding light, which also made the skin of the onlookers hurt due to how hot it was. Even the rank 4 monster was caught by the explosion, making it roar in pain as it temporarily lost its sight due to the brightness that appeared in front of it. The 5 Tigerkins grimaced in pain as they, too, were temporarily blinded by the explosion, making them regret not following the 7-year-old's order as soon as it was given. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 13 counted inside his head before opening his eyes. Open your eyes and prepare to fight. When they heard 13's command, everyone, with the exception of the 5 Tigerkins who were still reeling in pain, opened their eyes and began to prepare for battle. Christopher, focus on the hyenas in front of you. 13 commanded. Don't target the rank 4 monster. Focus your attention on the weaker ones first. Yes. Christopher acknowledged his young master's command and aimed. The hyenas were in disarray, and some of them collapsed on the ground, moving erratically as if they were undergoing an epilepsy attack. 13 was already firing one arrow after the other, but he didn't aim for the rank 3 monsters. He aimed for the leader of the hyenas, who was also affected by the explosion and unable to see properly. The 7-year-old knew that this was the only time he could launch an attack on the rank 4 monster, who was unable to defend itself from the boy's accurate attacks. The only thing the rank 4 monster heard was the whistling of an arrow before it hit its eye, making it roar in pain. However, a few seconds later, another arrow hit its remaining eye, blinding it completely. From the moment that it was caught up in the explosion, its fate had already been sealed. 13 had not only mastered the divine skill, cheap shot savant, but he was also very good in calculations. He had already calculated how the rank 4 monster would react once one of its eyes was pierced by the arrow, and aimed at that spot accordingly. 13 unleashed another arrow, and this time, he aimed it at the hyena's throat. However, unlike its eyes, the throat of the rank 4 monster was protected by a tough layer of skin, making the arrow he used only nick a part of its skin before bouncing off its body. Even so, 13 didn't falter and fired 2 more arrows at the same location where his arrow landed earlier, creating a small wound that was only a centimeter wide. But that was enough. As if waiting for that moment, a black snake leaped out from the darkness and sank her fangs into the small wound that her master had caused. Tiona injected as much poison as she could the moment her fangs pierced through the monster's body. With an angry roar, the hyena shook its head left and right in an attempt to dislodge whatever was biting its throat. Tiona released her bite and used that opportunity to be flung away from the rank 4 monster, whom she had successfully poisoned. The black snake hardened her body, turning into a black steel pike that pierced the ground where she landed. A moment later, she returned to her normal form and slithered away from her enemy into the darkness. 13 breathed a sigh of relief after seeing that Tiona was safe. However, his world momentarily spun, making him almost stagger. He could feel something warm on his face, but he had no time to check his condition. The battle was still going on, so he needed to endure the dizziness that assaulted him. Embedding his bow on the ground, he used it as support to lean on. He closed his eyes for a few seconds before opening them again to look at the state of the other hyenas, who had several arrows and crossbow bolts sticking out of their body. Due to them being disoriented and blinded, some of them fell into the pitfall traps around them. Out of the 8 hyenas who had tried to attack their wagons, only 5 remained, including the rank 4 monster that had suffered from 13's and Tiona's combination attack. Giga Chad, who had regained his composure, moved closer to the battlefield and once again unleashed a stink spray, covering the surviving hyenas in a blazing inferno. The battle raged on for a few minutes, as everyone attacked the hyenas who were no longer laughing and were instead howling in pain. In the midst of this battle, they didn't notice that their commander had long collapsed on the ground, with blood flowing out of his nose. 13 had used all of his willpower to calculate the trajectory of his arrows, making them hit where he wanted. Before he collapsed, he made sure to blind all the remaining hyenas, which turned the battle in their favor. However, while this was happening, the Warzer Black Hounds, who had been watching the battle from the side, made their move. They circled around to the rear of the party before leveraging their agility and dexterity to jump over the holes in the ground and land dozens of meters away from the unconscious boy, whose blood was still flowing from his nose. The Warzer Black Hounds were very intelligent monsters. They were not the strongest monsters in the Furvus Grasslands, but they were the most adaptable. These monsters choose their opponents wisely. One can even say that they bully the weak and fear the strong. But, due to this mentality, they managed to survive in a place where everything was darker than black. Taking advantage of the chaos that was happening inside the camp, they deftly navigated through the extremely narrow paths between the holes in the ground and made their way to where their comrade was held. With one powerful jump, they landed safely at the rear, unnoticed by the trolls, ogres, and tigerkins, who were preoccupied facing off against the golden-eyed hyenas, who were taking punishment from 13's merciless arrows. With blood flowing from his nose, the 7-year-old fired one arrow after another. Each arrow landed on his target's eyes, blinding them completely. Each shot was carefully calculated using his mental ability. If only he still had his system body, then such calculations would have been child's play, taking only a quarter of a second at most. Unfortunately, he was now a human child. Doing extreme and precise calculations not only took a little longer, but it was also taking a toll on his brain. However, 13 didn't waver. He knew that even though the hyenas might have been temporarily crippled by the explosion, this was just a temporary thing. If given enough time, the jinns would be able to regain their sense of sight, and when that happened, things would truly become dangerous. Jinns were stronger than ordinary monsters. What was worse was that the majority of them had the ability to enter a berserk state when they no longer cared for their lives. This last resort would increase their strength by more than half, which could easily turn the tide of battle. Even if 13's team would emerge victorious, they would still suffer casualties, which was something that the 7-year-old wanted to avoid no matter what. Because of this, despite the dizziness he was feeling, he gritted his teeth and kept his hands steady. He pushed his mental strength to the limit, giving him several seconds of clarity, allowing him to shoot his arrow with perfect accuracy. When the last remaining golden-eyed hyena was blinded by his arrow, he finally collapsed on the ground, his brain and body shutting down completely. This was also the time when the Warzer Black Hounds landed at the rear of their camp. 2 of the Black Hounds ran toward the steel cage, while the third one decided to take revenge on the person who had made its comrade suffer. When the caged hound was howling from pain, it repeatedly cursed the 7-year-old boy, which was heard by his comrades. The Warzer Black Hound repeatedly called 13 a little black-haired devil in their language, which was why the Black Hounds paid extra attention to the boy. Seeing that he was passed out, the third Black Hound didn't hesitate to charge in the fallen boy's direction, while his 2 other comrades rescued their caged brethren. It wanted to eliminate the boy as a form of revenge before leaving the camp with the rest of its comrades. However, that was its greatest mistake. If only you had freed your brethren and left quietly, then I would have turned a blind eye to your actions. Adira's cold voice reached the Black Hound's ears. Targeting Zion while he is unconscious was a very bad move on your part. In that instant, the Warzer Black Hound knew that someone very strong was behind it. Its first reaction was to distance itself from whoever it was, but it was already too late. Adira smashed her fist on the back of the Black Hound's head, knocking it unconscious. She then summoned her bow and fired 4 arrows in rapid succession, hitting the hind legs of the 2 other Warzer Black Hounds who were about to free their brethren. The arrows accurately hit the joints of their legs, making the 2 Black Hounds fall to the ground, howling in pain. Adira coldly looked at these monsters without a shred of mercy. "If the 2 of you move, the next arrows will hit your heads," Adira said with a voice filled with killing intent. "Do not test my patience." The drow had briefly unleashed the power of her rank, making the 2 Black Hounds whimper. Clearly, they realized that the drow, who had only been spectating the battle earlier, was actually a champion. After the 3 monsters had been dealt with, the drow supported the boy's body and made him sit leaning forward. She then lightly pinched his nose for a minute to put pressure on the blood vessels to stop the blood flow. Adira didn't dare to pinch 13's nose for more than a minute because the boy was unconscious. Fortunately, his body subconsciously reacted, and he started breathing through his mouth. Adira glanced at the ongoing battle from time to time. She had no intention of helping the others, with the exception of Christopher, because she knew that 13 treasured the chubby boy as his loyal subordinate. As for the others, they were just slaves in her eyes. They could die for all she cared. As long as Zion and Christopher were alive, none of the others mattered. Suddenly, Adira's right hand reached out to something in the darkness, which made her sigh. "Calm down, Tiona," Adira said as she looked at the black snake, whose head was firmly held by her fingers. "Don't kill this hound. Your master would prefer it alive than dead." The snake's body coiled around the drow's arm as she struggled to break free. When she saw that the black hound was about to attack her master, she immediately stopped biting the rank 4 hyena and rushed to his rescue. However, she was simply too far. Fortunately, Adira had made her move and neutralized the threat before it could harm 13. Even so, Tiona was still very angry because the black hound dared to attack her master. Because of this, she planned to bite the dog to oblivion until it drew its last breath. Unfortunately, her plan couldn't even be put into action because as soon as she propelled herself to shoot toward the black hound, with her fangs spread wide, the drow easily caught her midair, preventing her from taking her revenge. "I said stop it, Tiona," Adira ordered because the Domini Mortis in her grip was still raring to bite the black hound that Adira knocked unconscious. "If you really want revenge, I'll tie this dog to you. You can let Giga torture him until you're satisfied. Wouldn't that be a more fitting punishment rather than killing it?" After hearing Adira's proposal, Tiona finally calmed down. It then raised the tip of its tail to lightly tap on Adira's arm, telling the drow that she understood. "Are you sure that you won't attack after I let you go?" Adira questioned. Tiona made her tail move up and down as if nodding to the drow's question. Adira chuckled before loosening the grip of his fingers on the black snake's head, allowing it to move freely. Tiona glared at the black hound's face, which was only a meter away from her master. She then angrily used her tail to slap its face twice before crawling toward 13's body to check on his condition. The black snake flicked her tongue on the blood that was still flowing out of 13's nose as if attempting to wipe it away. Seeing this action, Adira took a piece of cloth from her storage ring and started to wipe 13's nose and lips, making him look less injured than he originally was. Half an hour later, the battle finally ended. It was only then that everyone realized that their leader had fallen unconscious due to the backlash of having pushed his mental power to the limit. Visego, who was circling in the sky, suddenly felt something from the northeast direction. After a few seconds of hesitation, he glanced at his master, who was being cared for by Adira, and Christopher before flying towards the northeast direction where it sensed a battle between 2 powerful monsters was taking place. Visego wanted to know if this battle would affect their camp from far away. If it would, he would return in a hurry and tell everyone to leave as fast as they could before it was too late. After Adira dealt with the Warzer Black Hounds, Christopher fired one cross bolt after the other. Standing behind him was Brutus, who handled the reload of his weapon, allowing the chubby boy to put all his focus into shooting the ammunition. His bolts were dipped in the poison of the yellow-striped dusk brute, so it had a corrosion effect that harmed the hyenas from the inside out. However, their bodies were very sturdy, so even when their bodies were riddled with arrows and cross bolts, they didn't die right away. They only died after O1 and O2 discarded their shields and pulled back the wagons, allowing the ogres to pass through the blockage and engage their blinded enemies in close combat. Bruno kept his shield up and used it to bash the rank 4 monster, pushing it into one of the holes in the ground. It might already be blinded, but there was still the possibility of it escaping. Bruno knew that he mustn't let the leader of the hyenas escape no matter what, so he put all of his attention on the strongest threat on the battlefield. Christopher's bolts only bounced off the body of the rank 4 monster, so he no longer attacked it and focused on the other hyenas, whose bodies weren't able to resist his attacks. After making sure that he had hit every last one of them, the trolls and the ogres teamed up to attack the blinded monsters, aiming for their heads with their swords. The battle was very bloody, and despite their lack of sight, the hyenas fought with everything they had, relying on their bestial instincts to swipe, bite, and charge at the opponents that were attacking them at close range. However, since they couldn't see their opponents properly, most of their attacks missed. Some of them had also fallen into the holes in the ground when they tried to tackle their opponents. Brutus and Bruno, who understood the importance of landing the killing blow to their enemies, told everyone to back away as they dealt the killing blow to the monsters, who were on their last legs. Brutus used a bow and arrow to attack the hyenas that had fallen in the hole, while Bruno took one of the jagged swords and handled the rest. Simply put, the hyenas suffered a one-sided beating, but this beating still took a lot of time due to their strong bodies. 3 hours later, Christopher sat beside 13, who was now sleeping on a bedroll. The younger boy still hadn't regained consciousness, so Christopher decided to stay by his side to keep watch on his condition. Tiona was coiled up on 13's chest. Just like Christopher, she was very worried about her master's condition and was also waiting for him to wake up. The 3 black hounds were now inside cages. All of them had their hind legs broken, preventing them from even standing up. Adira made sure that none of them would be able to run away so that she could give them to 13 as a gift in order to make the boy owe her a debt of gratitude. While everyone in the camp was still awake and keeping watch of their surroundings, Visago descended from the sky and landed beside 13's sleeping body. Seeing that his master was in no condition to give orders, the Poco started to make noise. Run! 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 Visago shouted. Danger! 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 Leave this place now. The Poco was imitating 13's voice in order to give out orders. A monster stampede is coming. Run! 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 Before they had begun their trip, 13 told Christopher that Visago could be trusted and that his words should be taken seriously. Although the 7-year-old didn't say anything else at that time, the chubby boy had seen that the Poco and his master communicated a lot, with the dumb-looking bird scouting their surroundings on a regular basis. Seeing the bird shouting orders using his young master's voice, Christopher knew that Visago wasn't just making it up. And even if the bird was just spouting nonsense, he would still believe him since he could let his young master punish it at a later time. Everyone, prepare to leave, Christopher shouted. Brutus, carry the young master to the first wagon. As for the rest, get the horses. Move, people. Percival, the trolls, the ogres, and the tigerkins, who were 13's slaves, frowned after hearing Christopher's orders. Since he wasn't their master, they were reluctant to obey their orders. However, when the chubby boy threatened them that he would tell the 7-year-old that they didn't follow his orders, all of them started to take his orders more seriously. Adira then ordered the ogres to attach the 5 steel cages, which contained the 4 black hounds and the black panther that 13 had caught on the day they arrived at the Furvus Grasslands. With each wagon pulling a steel cage, they hastily left their camp, not even bothering to extinguish the campfire. 10 minutes after leaving their camp, they all heard the sound of countless monsters running in their direction, which made them feel as if the ground was trembling. Move faster, Adira ordered. Those who get left behind will have to fend for themselves. Within the darkness of the Furvus Grasslands, countless glowing orbs of light could be seen in the distance. These glowing orbs were none other than the eyes of the monsters, who were trying to flee as fast as they could from something terrifying. Just behind this massive monster stampede, hundreds of golden-eyed hyenas were spread out, killing the stragglers that were being left behind. Leading them was the rank 5 hyena overlord, who planned to break through to the next rank in a hurry so that it could face off against the purple-eyed honey badger, who had decided to challenge it to a turf war. The two had fought briefly, with the hyena getting injured by the honey badger. It was only a minor injury, but it was enough to tell the hyena that it couldn't beat its opponent with its current strength. The hundreds of hyenas it had brought had also attacked the honey badger, but their attacks were unable to penetrate its steel-like body. They only died a pitiful death after being swiped or bitten by the honey badger, whose ferocity wouldn't lose to a djinn. Because of this, the rank 5 overlord ordered its forces to retreat, leaving behind the honey badger, who then busied itself with eating the hyenas that had died in battle. Knowing that the purple-furred honey badger would continue to pursue it, the rank 5 overlord decided to hunt en masse, alongside its remaining subordinates, in order to recover from its injury, as well as break through to the next rank. Truth be told, if given a month or two, the leader of the hyenas would also become a rank 6 overlord. Perhaps, knowing that this was going to happen, the purple-furred honey badger decided to kill it before it could become stronger. It naturally had no plans of letting its rival grow in strength, and killing it would end all of its worries. Unfortunately, the purple-furred honey badger wasn't really a long-distance fast runner. It could run in quick bursts, but it was not capable of running for long distances non-stop. Using this to its advantage, the hyenas decided to distance themselves from it and hunt the monsters they encountered along the way as they headed toward the Furvus grasslands. Because of this, a monster stampede was created with both the herbivores and the carnivores of the grasslands running for their lives. Those who couldn't run fast enough were devoured by the rank 5 overlord, allowing it to take another step closer to its evolution. The wagons rattled as the horses ran at their full speed, hoping to distance themselves from the horde of monsters that were running in their direction. They were at least a mile away from their location, but they could hear the sounds of countless animals moving in their direction in order to flee the horrors that were hunting them from behind. Adira, who had taken the reins that controlled the horses of the first wagon, was pushing the horses to their limits. If it was only her, she could probably escape without a problem. However, she couldn't leave Zion and Christopher behind, which forced her to take command of the party since the 7-year-old was unconscious. If not for Visego's warning, the monster stampeded might have already overtaken them. Fortunately, Christopher had trusted the Pocopoco's words and commanded everyone to evacuate as fast as they could. While everyone was doing their best to hold onto the shaking wagons, the 7-year-old stirred in his sleep, but didn't open his eyes. "What's happening, Christopher?" 13 asked as he propped himself in a seating position. His eyes were closed, as if he was unable to open them temporarily. "Young master, there is currently a monster stampede behind us," Christopher replied. He then explained that Visego had warned them about the incoming disaster, which prompted them to evacuate their camp as soon as possible. The younger boy didn't interrupt Christopher's explanation and waited until he finished his report. When he was done, 13 nodded his head in understanding. "Good job, Christopher," 13 praised. "You saved everyone." The chubby boy couldn't stop himself from smiling after getting praised by his young master, which was something that he didn't get from his original master, Terence. Having learned their current situation, the 7-year-old placed his index finger and thumb finger inside his mouth and whistled loudly. A moment later, Visego entered the first wagon and landed beside his master, who still had his eyes closed. Although Adira was busy driving the first wagon, her ears were paying close attention to what was happening inside. Knowing that the drow was eavesdropping, 13 started to chirp like a bird, making Adira frown. Christopher, Jasmine, and Ariel, on the other hand, looked at the 7-year-old weirdly. However, after the boy started chirping, the Pocopoco chirped back in return. When the system god stripped Zion's body of all of its potential, he had to replace it with something of equal value to compensate for the loss. Even the gods need to pay a price for their actions, and this was why Deus Ex Machina had bestowed upon 13th's new vessel the power of universal language proficiency. This gave him the ability to communicate with anyone and anything, as long as they had a means of communication. Because of this ability, the system god didn't receive a penalty for tampering with Zion's mortal body. Since he had made a promise to the Poco to keep it secret, 13 decided to use a method that wouldn't allow anyone to understand what they were talking about. In their eyes and ears, 13 was just randomly chirping like a bird, which made no sense at all. Visago, who had been asked to tell him everything about the current situation, replied in kind. "Tell me our current situation," 13 ordered. Visago nodded and began to tell his master everything. "Currently, the monster Stampede is just a mile away and will overtake our party very soon," Visago reported. Behind them, at least 2 miles away, hundreds of hyenas, led by their overlord, are devouring everything in their path. The rank 5 overlord has suffered injuries from its clash with the purple-furred honey badger and decided to escape. However, it didn't just plan to escape, but grow stronger in a short period of time. Because of this, his subordinates spread out as they started to sweep over the Warzer plains, forcing the other monsters to flee in this direction. The honey badger is in hot pursuit, but since it's not built for long-distance running, it is still 4 miles away from the golden-eyed hyenas. 13 pondered a bit after hearing Visago's reply. He knew that sooner or later, the golden-eyed hyenas would also overtake their party, and when that happened, it would be game over for them. After a few minutes, 13 formed a plan that would help save his people from a fate worse than death. "Lady Adira, please lead the others back to Groner City," 13 said as he crawled towards the rear of the wagon where the steel cage of the Warzer Black Hound that he had captured was tied up. "What are you planning, Zion?" Adira asked, feeling that the boy was going to do something reckless. "Young master." Christopher looked at the younger boy with an anxious look on his face. "What are you going to do?" "Bargain." "Ha! I'm going to bargain." Although 13 still had his eyes closed, he deftly crawled to the rear of the wagon, facing the caged Warzer Black Hound, who was whimpering inside its cage. "Hey, can you understand me?" 13 asked. The Black Hound shifted its attention to the 7-year-old who had made it suffer a lot. "I know that you hate me, but I have a proposal to make," 13 stated. "Because of you, your comrades have been captured and injured. In short, they are currently suffering because of you." The Black Hound momentarily forgot its fear as it growled at the 7-year-old in anger. 13 ignored the dog's growl and continued what he was going to say. "I have a proposal to make," 13 stated. "If you promise to help me, I will not only set them free, but I will have their injuries healed as well. Of course, if you don't want to agree, that's fine as well. I'll just use them as bait for the golden-eyed hyenas that are right behind us." The Warzer Black Hound glanced at its comrades, who were inside the steel cages with their hind legs broken. It knew that if the monsters overtook them, none of its brethren would be able to get away. The Black Hound then barked at 13, asking the boy what he wanted. "Cooperate with me to divert the attention of the golden-eyed hyenas," 13 stated. "If you do that, your brethren will live, and their injuries will be healed. What do you say?" "Master, are you mad?" Christopher, who had been listening to what 13 was saying, interjected. "This is a monster. How can you possibly trust it? What if it breaks its word?" "Right now, we are on the same boat," 13 replied calmly. "If he doesn't agree to my proposal, then he and his brethren will become food for the hyenas. I'm just offering it a chance to live. That's what I'm saying." Christopher clenched his fists. "What if it doesn't keep its promise?" "It won't." "What makes you so sure that it won't?" 13 smiled faintly. Although he couldn't see Christopher's current expression, he was very certain that his chubby boy was very worried about him. Instead of answering Christopher, 13 asked the Black Hound a question. "Will you agree to my proposal?" The Warzer Black Hound once again glanced at his comrades before barking twice. "Good." 13 nodded. "Christopher, swap places with Lady Adira for the time being. I will need her help to free the Warzer Black Hound." Christopher couldn't help but feel that his young master had gone mad. However, he still followed his order because even if Zion was about to do something crazy, he believed that the 7-year-old still knew what he was doing. Adira, who had heard everything from start to finish, shared Christopher's sentiments. But, since their current situation was desperate, she decided to put her trust in the boy, who was willing to put his life on the line for a chance of survival. Zion, I sure hope that you know what you're doing because I don't want to believe that you don't, Adira said as the 7-year-old unlocked the steel cage, allowing the Warzer Black Hound to exit the cage and run alongside the first wagon. Help me ride the Warzer Black Hound, Lady Adira, 13 said. I will handle the rest. You and the rest escape. Fool, do you think I'll leave you alone? Adira snorted. Christopher, you and the others head back to Groner City. We will meet you guys as soon as we can. After saying those words, the drow jumped off the first wagon, carrying the 7-year-old over her shoulder like a sack of rice. She then landed deftly at the back of the Warzer Black Hound and summoned several shadows to bind her, and Zion firmly to its back, preventing themselves from falling off. What's the plan? Adira asked. We will run toward the hyenas, 13 replied. Then we will act as bait to divert their attention. Are you mad? Adira was almost regretting her decision to accompany the boy on this suicide mission. Even the Warzer Black Hound wanted to question the boy's order, but after hearing his explanation, the drow and the Black Hound both shut up. First, Blackie will be able to outrun the hyenas, keeping us safe, 13 explained. Even if the rank 5 overlord were to run after us, we can still escape without a problem. The Warzer Black Hound barked as if asking the boy whom he was calling Blackie, because it refused to acknowledge that it had been given a very mundane name. Blackie, we don't have time, so circle around the monster Stampede so that we can arrive at its rear, 13 ordered. The sooner we distract them, the safer our companions will be. The Black Hound barked, still refusing to acknowledge the name that the boy was using to call it. However, it still followed 13's orders and dashed to the side to get away from the front of the monster Stampede while circling towards its back. Zion, what's wrong with your eyes? Adira asked the boy who was seated behind her. Can you not open them? I can, 13 replied. But I won't. I am focusing my senses on my hearing. Besides, even if my eyes are open, it's too dark for me to see anything. I don't have dark vision, so it will just be a waste of brain power. What nonsense are you talking about? Lady Adira, please be quiet. I am waiting for Visego's signal. Just as the younger boy was saying, he was currently focusing his brain power to focus only on his sense of hearing. The moment he landed on the Black Hound's back, he temporarily opened his eyes and could only see a blur of his surroundings, so he just closed his eyes again. He believed that this was just a temporary thing to push his vision and concentration past his limits. The boy didn't even have the luxury of blinking when he was targeting the hyena's eyes in order to blind them in the battle they had a few hours ago. Because of this, he had strained his eyes, making him only see blurry images. 13 believed that after a full rest, his vision would return to normal again. Unfortunately, he didn't have the time to rest. First, he had to distract the jinns and force them to change their course in order to ensure that Christopher and the others could safely escape. I can see them. Adira's body tensed after seeing countless golden eyes at the back of the monster Stampede. She also saw how they attacked the pitiful monsters that had lost their strength to run, tearing their bodies apart with their strong jaws. Behind them was a towering monster that was at least 5 meters tall, which was the rank 5 overlord that ruled them. Although it was bigger than the purple-furred honey badger, the smaller monster was stronger and more ferocious than it, forcing the rank 5 overlord to escape from their clash. What now? Adira asked. You don't need to do anything, Lady Adira, 13 replied. I'll handle the rest. Just help control Blackie. The Black Hound barked twice as if telling the boy not to call him Blackie. The 7-year-old then started making bird sounds out loud, catching Visego's attention. The Poco replied with his own chirping before executing 13's orders. Lady Adira, can you turn my body around? 13 asked. I need enough space to draw my bow. Currently, 13's head was pressed on Adira's back because he was bound by a black shadow, holding him in place so that he wouldn't fall off as the Black Hound ran at full speed. Adira knew better than to argue with Zion, so she did as he asked and made it so he could turn around. The first thing the 7-year-old did was reach out his hand towards his left, taking his bow out of his dimensional storage. Before losing consciousness, he made sure to store his bow so that it wouldn't get left behind. After holding the bow firmly in his hand, he took out an arrow from his dimensional storage and prepared to load it. Suddenly, he heard Visego's whistle, letting him know the location of the rank 5 overlord. After knocking his arrow on the bow, 13 took aim with his eyes still closed. Visego's whistle once again reached his ears, making him adjust the position of his bow. The 7-year-old then calmly waited for the third whistle to sound. That would be the last-minute adjustment that he needed for his arrow to find his mark. He didn't have to wait for long because, a few seconds later, Visego's whistle reached his ears, prompting him to fire in that direction. The sound of metal hitting metal faintly echoed in the darkness as 13's arrow bounced off the rank 5 overlord's body. However, he had already anticipated this to happen. If his arrow couldn't penetrate the body of a rank 4 hyenas, then there was no way it could pierce through the coat of the rank 5 overlord, who was several times stronger than the hyena he had fought earlier. But 13 didn't plan on fighting the leader of the hyenas. He just wanted to catch his attention. Knocking another arrow on his bow, the boy waited for Visego's signal before firing another one. This time, his arrow flew toward the hyena's face, bouncing off of its snout. The rank 5 overlord growled as it shifted its attention toward the boy who was riding on the back of a Warzer black hound. It didn't notice 13 earlier because the latter was too small and too insignificant to notice. However, after the golden-eyed hyena's gaze landed on his body, it instantly recognized the boy as a human, not just any ordinary human, but a wanderer. The jinns loved to feast on wanderers on a bestial level because they knew that they were their natural enemies. Jinns already liked to eat humans, to begin with, and wanderers were like a super delicious delicacy for them. Seeing him for what he truly was, the rank 5 overlord roared, ordering its subordinates to capture the boy so that he could feast on his flesh. "Run, Forest, run." Visego's cry reached 13's ears, informing him that he had accomplished his mission. "Blackie, run away to the west," 13 ordered. The black hound no longer bothered to bark at the annoying boy and just did what it was told. Just like 13 had predicted, the golden-eyed hyenas all ran after him, desperate to take a bite out of his body. The drow, whose brows were furrowed, glanced behind her and asked 13 a question. "Why west?" Adira asked. "Because the hyena's worst enemy is in that direction," 13 answered. "We are simply making it so the two of them meet again." After giving his reply, the boy shot another arrow, which once again bounced off the rank 5 overlord's face, infuriating it further. Adira, who had no idea that they were running in the direction of the purple-furred honey badger, no longer talked and focused on the path in front of her. The black hound's tongue was already lolling from the side of its mouth as it decreased its speed to save its strength. Similar to the drow, it didn't know what the 7-year-old was thinking. However, it remained vigilant as it ran at a steady pace. It didn't leave the hyenas in the dust but maintained a safe distance from them, giving these terrifying monsters hope that the black hound would soon get tired. And once they caught up, they could finally sink their teeth into the flesh of the delicious human boy, who had released another arrow flying toward their leader's nose.